Doom CM is a joke compared to Harvest Temple CM. It is laughably easy compared to Harvest Temple CM.
To be fair, I feel like a lot of this hard content, we think of it as like, people who have actually cleared it, but there were thousands and thousands of people watching it, right? So it's like, it's content in the sense where it's not, you don't have to just be playing the content to get enjoyment out of it. You can watch like your streamers do it, you can hear people talking about it. It's just, a topic maybe to bring up like in your raid group when you're like doing your full clear for like the 20th time in a row or something like that. It's content in the sense where you don't just have to play the game for it to be content.
But there's sort of this gloom in the Guild Wars 2 community sometimes where people are almost embarrassed of their game. And and I think there was a moment there where that was gone and people were really proud to be Guild Wars 2 players.
Do you want to talk about balance?
I was just about to say, there's a big elephant in the room and let's just say it's not wearing an elementalist outfit.
Yeah.
For specifically like warrior, I don't think it's even justifiable to like say they just looked at the data wrong or they just made the solution in a vacuum. With warrior in particular, it feels like they just tried to play a prank or quite honestly communicate that warrior mains aren't welcome in the game. It just feels like they said, hey, maybe we should just see, let's do an experiment. Let's see how the game works if Warrior's not in it anymore. This could be really interesting.
Wow, look at us. We're here. It's tea time. And goodness me, what a few weeks it has been in Guild Wars 2. We've had some balance patch shenanigans going on. We've got some balance notes. We've got banners. We've got spirits. We've got everything. And of course, we have the Harvest Temple Challenge mode as well, which is a very, very big deal in Guild Wars 2 history, I think. There's definitely some very strong opinions about the content, right? A lot of interesting discussion and honestly, some really interesting consequences of this, some wide-reaching effects, even into other games. I'm going to get into all of that just about now, actually, because that's why we started the stream. Of course, welcome to my wonderful guests. Hello, everyone. Hello. We have a scintillating cast of vast intellects to discuss these very important topics to Guild Wars 2. And I think I'm just going to kind of open it. I want to go, yeah, 5-head. Yeah, that is 5-head. I want to do Harvest Temple Challenge mode first, right? People have been talking about balance too much at this point. It's out of control, right? Sneb is basically every single day we talk about balance, he lowers into his chair a little bit more, like psychologically crumbling, melting down into the ground. So enough of all that. It's time for Harvest Temple Challenge mode. What do you think? I'm throwing it to Sneb. Sneb's in the mix. I just bullied him in StarCraft 2. Now I'm going to put him on the spot here as well. Okay. Harvest Temple Challenge mode, Sneb. Tell me, what is it? What's going on? Give me the juice, the details.
Personally, I prefer to be addressed as Master Sneb, given our 2v2 triumph the other day, getting Masters in 2v2 and start drafting. Knockbacks, you use pulls, you use teleports and portals, and you do all of these things to try to maximize your DPS uptime and really stay on top of all the mechanics. I think that is really cool for Guild Wars 2 because this is the only fight I feel we've ever had that really shows the potential and endgame content for Guild Wars 2. Because it uses everything. Everything. People are changing sigils to night sigils and anything to eke out just a little bit more DPS. I think that's really neat. Now, somebody like me, I may never beat it. And I think that's okay because the competition and the storyline surrounding Harvest Temple Race to World First was incredible. For a week long, we had people, well, just under a week, we had people on Reddit keeping track of who was progging it. There were different teams. Snowcrows was ahead for a while, and then Hardstuck was ahead for a while, and then Hardstuck did an 18-hour, and it was just neck and neck, back and forth. And people people were going stream to stream. Who's ahead? Who's ahead? What strategy have they figured out? Viewership was really high. People were just excited. People that would never play this content ever just became really engrossed in the story. I know I kept checking constantly to see if somebody was going to beat it while I was asleep. I thought it was amazing. And I think that's really special. And it got the attention of Max, Liquid now, Liquid Maximum. I just think that's really cool. It's getting attention from other games. We've seen, was it the Lazy Peon? Is it Josh, Strife Hayes? Did they all?
They were both lurking around,
well?
just checking it out, seeing what's going on.
Look how much notoriety this got. Even if you can't appreciate sort of the skill and the time that goes into that, look at the marketing. They're showing this to an entirely new demographic. We'll show it to other players. You can say, hey, Guild Wars 2 has this really cool endgame content, but if that's not really your thing, they actually have one of the most robust storylines in any MMO, and they have one of the best, open world pieces of content in any MMO. Like, you can just go into all of these other flavors, and I think that's really neat and really special. And I really hope that people appreciate how cool Harvest Temple CM is, even if that's not quite your thing.
I could actually. Oh no, you go ahead, Emmy.
Okay, I was gonna say, speaking from personal experience, I've had a lot of new people kind of like express interest in Guild Wars 2, probably because they were being filtered here from Maximum and Lazy Peon and all of the others, and they would come in and they'd be like, "Wow, it's like all of Guild Wars 2 endgame content like this. I've never seen this in any other MMO. Is it easy to get into?" So there was a lot of just interest, not just from within the our own community, but from other communities, kind of also chiming in and kind of seeing what the combat system, what the sort of all of the boon system, support system, soft trinity, all that kind of stuff that Guild Wars 2 has to offer, which is really cool.
I was actually in a really interesting position with this because a friend of mine invited me over to help install some furniture and some wall mounts for his monitors in his new house. And he was a top 3 warrior player, NA and WoW. He was in a big raid cell guild. This guy can pick up a video game and he's fucking he instantly figures it out. And he's really fucking good just at games in general and problem solving and all this shit. And so I put it on, I was watching it and listening to it on my phone, Teapot stream for the progression. And he asked me, he's just what's going on? Because he knows who you are, because I've talked about you before to him. But we put it up on the TV in the living room, and within 2 pulls, he had figured out everything that was happening. He's like, okay, cool, they're portaling. I didn't know you could portal in this game. You have deadly boss mods too for this. And he was talking about the green circles and the AoE tick downs. I was like, no, that's built into the game. And as he's figuring it out and as I'm explaining things to him, he's just getting excited. He's like, oh yeah, this looks fun. Fuck yeah, this looks like a cool game. And he's he played Guild Wars 2 at launch with me, and he quit after 3 weeks because he basically figured out before anyone else in the entire game that Berserker's armor and sword focus and great sword on Guardian, you could solo everything. He figured that out and then he's quit. But he's looking at all this and he's super impressed. He's this is really fucking cool. I didn't know that they made content for this game still. It's I haven't heard about this game since 2012. People still play it, and he just goes through the usual thing, and he's like, can you show me some more stuff? Can you show me some more content? I showed him Doom CM. He's like, this is fucking awesome. And then he's like, what else you got? And I'm like, that's about it. There's other stuff, but everything is pretty easy. A lot of the content is the stuff that I do is old and outdated visually, dungeons. And I was explaining that he would probably like dungeon solos and shit like that, but he lit up and he was so into it. And the funniest thing he said is he was like, why isn't Teapot playing with colorblind mode on? Because all of the particle effects in the Dragon Void is super distracting. It's in WoW, you can just make all that orange. And I was like, we don't have that option in this game. So it was really cool seeing someone that's really hardcore into another game, really good at it, light up and see the MMO that I'm playing and that I love figure it out, be impressed by it. But then like the sad part was when the rest of it hit. It's just like, yeah, this is the hardest content we've ever got, and it was recent, and like there hasn't been like a raid or anything in like 4 years. Oops. And we talked about kind of how, wow, whenever content comes out, like it's, you play that expansion or that patch and you get max gear and then you just quit and move on to something else. And in Guild Wars 2 you don't really have that because people kind of just like quit and don't do the content anymore anyways, I guess. But it was really cool. Like it was a good experience. I really liked it. And it made me appreciate that ArenaNet was willing to put in difficult content, and seeing other people have also been lured into like, oh, let's check this out. Ooh, this is interesting. It was pretty cool.
In ArenaNet's defense, I think there was definitely a period of a lot of content drought. I think most people know there was like a lot of like internal like restructuring and that sort of thing. But I think at the very least in the past like few months, like they've been pretty good with like the content releases. Like we got the new strike CMs, each one kind of getting like progressively harder and harder every few weeks. And then they've kind of like, said that, they're laying the groundwork so that they can do more of this kind of stuff. And I've always been a very firm believer in like they are a business, so they have to do, what's profitable to them. And if like making endgame content isn't very profitable, then obviously they're not going to invest that much money into it, right? But it seems like right now with like, just in general, like the attitude, the marketing, all of that kind of stuff, it seems like they do want to place more emphasis on this. So the more people that start doing this type of content, the more people will be able to generate revenue for them in this kind of content. And then, it kind of becomes like this positive like reinforcement sort of thing. So I don't know, maybe it's like a little bit too hopium or something like that. But I think they're definitely moving in a direction where I think there will be more releases of this kind of like stuff. Whereas like I think in the past they focus almost exclusively on like extremely casual things that you can usually complete within like a day or two, that it was super, super accessible for pretty much everyone. Whereas nowadays they're kind of like creating these sort of like soft like tiers where you have to like actually progress towards. So
You can make a banner ad and pay thousands of dollars to put it on people's streams and put it in front of people on Facebook, or you can make one really good piece of content that people will talk about.
Well, yeah. I think we do have to consider that this is very, very niche content. I think that is I think we don't want to get too caught up in it. I think my big takeaway from this, from Harvest Temple CM, is that it was very unexpected. Nobody saw this coming. It really is quite difficult, actually. It's easily the hardest thing that ArenaNet have ever added to the game. And I think it's remarkable that they would even do that. Like, to me, it's crazy that they would ever add something this hard to the game. Even something like Kinding Overlook challenge mode, that only took a few hours to beat at the end of the day. And if you go in there with a group of players, you'll probably be able to teach them the ropes and kill it like within, in one session, right? That's realistic to do. I don't think it's realistic to beat Harvest Temple in one session. It's a fight that, in my opinion, isn't puggable. You can't just join a pug group and then kill it, in one go.
No way.
You're going to have to make a group and actively stay together and beat it. That's the only way it's going to happen. There's just not going to be a point in time where it's going to get easy enough that you'll be able just to one-shot it with like 10 random people or like kill it in like 10 tries. It's not going to happen. Like, I'm just trying to contextualize how difficult it really is. It is absolutely brutal. Like right now, exactly 30 people have beaten it in the entire game, right? Not 30 guilds, 30 players have beaten it. So that's exactly Snowcrow's, Hardstuck, and My Chaotic Asylum have beaten this. There are a few guilds that I'm expecting to kill with this week or potentially next week, for sure. So there are more guilds going for it, but it is unbelievably uncommon. For some perspective here, right? If you look at something like Doom CM, I think something like 8,000 people have got Doom CM. Now, to be fair, some of that is probably buyers. Maybe like half of that is buyers or something like that. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. But the comparison there is pretty insane, right? Obviously, Doom CM has been out for a much longer period of time as well. And obviously, as time goes on, more and more people will eventually beat Harvest Temple CM. But I think it's remarkable that they would ever add this to the game. And despite the fact that it is very niche, I do think that it is like a really, really exciting thing for sure. Like, because not only did it create a spike in viewership, it was a sustained spike in viewership. And to be honest, I think if anything, it will be more next time around because now people will see it coming, right? So guilds will prepare for it. So the race will be at an even higher level. The community will kind of be ready for it, for something like this to happen. I think the really big question is, would they ever add something like this to the game ever again? It's a really good question, to be honest. I'm certainly not expecting every challenge mode to be this level. I'm not even sure if that will be desirable. Can you imagine if they release something this hard every 3 months or so? I mean, I'm down. I'm down, but that might be a little bit too much. That might wear people out over time.
Yeah. To be fair, I feel like a lot of this hard content, we think of it as like, people who have actually cleared it, but there were thousands and thousands of people watching it, right? So it's like, it's content in the sense where it's not, you don't have to just be playing the content to get enjoyment out of it. You can watch like your streamers do it. You can hear people talking about it. It's just, a topic maybe to bring up like in your raid group when you're like doing your full clear for like the 20th time in a row or something like that. It's content in the sense where you don't just have to play the game for it to be content. Like I think watching things like I use other games kind of as an example, but it's like very few people can play at an extremely high level, right? Like not just in Guild Wars 2, but like across the board in all games. Like that's why like esports is such a big industry, is because we enjoy watching other people doing things that we might not necessarily be able to do ourselves, whether it's because of skill constraints or time constraints or I don't know, whatever other constraints there might be. So it's like, I don't know. I hope ArenaNet kind of sees this and like really realizes like Guild Wars 2 could be like, almost like a spectator sport sort of thing, like maybe not quite to this degree, maybe make it a little bit more accessible. But I think every single Strike CM that's come out so far has generated a lot of buzz. Like every time, like the day it's released, it's all I hear people talking about it. It's like you like log into Twitch, it's all people are watching and it's all people are doing for at least like the next few days. And like even that it does serve as kind of like a long-term goal as well for like, maybe smaller guilds, like super tight-knit guilds that don't just fall apart after like a week or something like that. This is like, a long-term stretch goal for them. And I think like, especially since they're trying to make classes and builds and stuff more accessible and like lower the skill floor, that's like a whole different topic and stuff. But if they actually do succeed in doing that, I think we will definitely see more people seeing this as like, a viable thing to do in the game. So
yeah, I want to comment on that. So people might interpret what I said earlier, when I said, oh, you could spend $1,000 on banner ad or you could make a piece of content. And they might be like, well, yeah, that content isn't for everybody. But I really like what you said. It kind of is. It's not going to fit everybody. No piece of content will. But just because you're not the one playing it doesn't mean that you can't appreciate or enjoy it. It's just like any sport, really. When you go and watch professional players, you're like, I'm never going to be a professional player, but you can appreciate the talent and the skill and the thought and the strategy and all that goes into a game like that. Like I know almost nothing about baseball, but I went to a Mariners game because I thought, wow, these people are really good at this game. This is kind of cool, right?
Well, and the other thing with that is like, the better you are at it, and if you're watching better players, the more appreciation for it you have, because you understand like the investment at a higher and higher level as you go, depending on how like good or bad you are. And then like the low tier, you're just like, yeah, that's my team, TSM, fuck yeah. And like that's your gaming experience. You get to like you get to, I feel like with stuff like this, where you have thousands of people watching like really hardcore players like race to do it the first, that really does feel like it gives a lot of people access into consuming and playing the content. Because like, I'm not gonna fucking do it. I don't want to go find 10 players and grind Guild Wars 2 for a week to beat the content. I watched Teapot kill it and like I'm happy, like I'm good. I know that like I can look at it and analyze and figure out what's going on, and I'm confident that if I put 20 plus hours into it, I could go into a team that had had experience with it, and we could probably do it after a while. But like I feel rewarded, and like I feel like I've consumed the content by proxy just by watching it. But at the same time, also like your big sports teams, whenever they win like a Super Bowl, the Super Bowl or a championship, and they get a trophy, like do people sit around and complain that they don't also get a Super Bowl ring just because like they have a jersey? Like you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, like you know what? Fuck these players. Like I played football. Like I should get a Super Bowl. I live in Dallas. Like why can't I have a ring? Fuck you. Like I buy all the merch. I watch all the games on TV. But that's what people do in Guild Wars too. Like you have people that are angry. Nerf Harvest Temple now. I play Guild Wars 2. I need the title. I deserve it. It's mine. Yeah.
Yeah. So
To be fair, I was gonna say, I think to be fair, most people like I think that's definitely the toxic minority that's kind of chiming in saying that. I think the majority of people might see it as kind of like a vague disappointment. It's like, oh, I wish I could do that, but I probably won't be able to do it. And I maybe playing a little bit of devil's advocate here. To be fair, that's like what the game has taught players to expect, right? It's like the game has taught you, like if you put in the bare minimum amount of effort, you get pretty much all of the reward, right? And I think it's only been very, very recently with like the expansion and everything. Like, we first saw it with Dragon's End, and then we see it with the Strike CMs, and then most likely like, future stuff as well, that like, this is not stuff that everyone can do. And you do kind of have to like live vicariously through other people instead of like doing it yourself, or you have to actually like go out of your way to like put together a group and that sort of thing. So I think I do think there is a bit of an adjustment period. Like I think most of the people that I've spoken to, like, the casual players, like even within my own community, are like perfectly okay with it. They see it as like, oh, well, it's disappointing. I don't think I'll ever have the time to really invest into doing this kind of stuff, but good for you guys, And I think that's just like a very big, almost like a cultural shift in the game, right? It's like to go from the expectation of like, I can just press 1 in like Arc base and meta and get compensated just as much as the people who actually did the mechanics, to now I had to actually do like a full rotation, put in like, effort into gearing my character. And even then I still might not be able to get this content. So
Well, you go ahead, Snap. It's all right. I was just gonna say like it's actually even worse than that. Like in specifically since you said like Auric Basin and Octavine, because you do have a lot of players that are going in and pressing 1 but you have players like me who are going in and using Scorpion Wire on top of mobs and the bomb that you have to press, and like oopsies, like the bomb went the wrong direction. Oh shit! But then it just fucking like it just clears anyways, because like you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to win. Like, can you imagine if you went into Harvest Temple CM? Teapot, that happened with you with the Doom CM, right? Or with Doom, you had someone that was actively griefing the entire group, and didn't you still beat it? Like, you still beat it, right?
You mean Doom CM?
Yeah.
Well, the original.
You had someone.
Well, yeah, I have had situations like that. But yeah, my Doom CM scenario. Oh man, it was really messed up. So I had a team that we did Doom normal mode, and they actively refused to do Doom CM.
Really? Huh.
Yeah. They outright said they were worried that we couldn't kill it. They didn't say that, but that's my interpretation of it, right? They were, and I think that this is a super interesting topic with regards to Harvest Temple CM as well, that I think you kind of touched on here, is that you might try and you might lose. The game might beat you. You might be forced to give up. And that's kind of what happened with Doom CM with my group. I eventually just basically pugged it at the end and just forced people to do it with whoever was left over, basically. But yeah, like that's the story there. And it's an interesting thing. The game could win. The game could win.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're afraid of failure, then you're going to have a rough time with this stuff, because you're going to go in and you're going to get wrecked. I died on like the first phase immediately. I died 5 times in a row to the crab. like the first crab.
Yes.
And it
The
mentally
crab.
shattered our team. Like we actually stopped after that. We had been going for like 3 hours, and my group we died 5 times in a row to the first crab, and we were just done, right? And and that's part of it. I mean, that's the experience, right? And after we've gotten through all these phases, we now look fondly back on the times when the first crab would decimate us. It's kind of cool, and I don't know. I think it's really special. Again, I've died to the thing a million times, and that's okay. I'm okay with it. But if you're not okay with it, I can see why you're pretty frustrated right now.
Yeah,
like
for
it
sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You used decimate correctly. That's impressive. Because there were 10 of you and the crab just killed you. That's really good, Sneb. I'm proud of
Crabs.
you. The ritual, the ancient Canthan ritual of Decumatio in Harvest Temple CM.
Yeah. I think this is, you know, I'll redirect this in just a moment, just as to kind of conclude this tangent. I think it is really interesting that in modern gaming, people expect the game to lose, right? Like, I paid my money, game, lose. You know, you don't get, the game doesn't get to win. Whereas I feel like this definitely wasn't the case in the olden days, right? I remember playing a lot of games as a kid and not beating them, right? You'd get stuck at some point and go like, oh man, I can't get past this level. I'm sure a lot of people in the chat, everyone's a boomer here, so I imagine everyone's had that experience to an extent, right? You play the game, you enjoy the game, and you can't beat it. And that was expected, right? That was part of the video gaming experience. But I think these days, that isn't the case. Players expect the game to lose, right? Every single time without fail. And look, this is like a TeaTime meme. It's like, you know, it's like Yu-Gi-Oh at this point, right? That's an old one, okay? Like, you know, shout out to anyone who remembers the Yu-Gi-Oh memes, right? Yeah, that's true actually.
He died like 2 days ago.
That is true actually. Yeah, that's slightly topical.
Man.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean the TeaTime Yu-Gi-Oh memes. How like in the well, I'm just going to explain it. Now. I'm ruining the subtle inside joke. But you know, a long time ago on TeaTime. There was like an inside meme that Brazil would randomly mention Yu-Gi-Oh at least once, particularly Dark Magician Girl at least once on the show. And yeah, this is kind of the same thing. I'm just going to bring up Dragon's End here. You know, this is definitely the Dragon's End thing, right? Because like, people expect the game to lose, right? People weren't ready for Suwon to destroy them, right? To give them 83 copper and send them back to the start of the map. And I think that's kind of the same with Harvest Temple, right? Like, you know, there is this like, whoa, we might not win. Because I feel like with everything else in the game, if you keep trying Doom CM, you will eventually beat it, right? Like you'll eventually get there. You know, it's not actually super tight in terms of executing it or like having a really good understanding of how it works. But with Harvest Temple Challenge Mode, you really need to know how it works if you want to beat it. You need to, you can't like just luck through it, right? You can't just brute force it. You need to understand it and do it really well. Otherwise you will lose. And there's a very real chance that a lot of groups that are going for it now won't get it, which I think is a very interesting dynamic to introduce into the game.
To be fair, I was gonna say this. I think it's the other way around. I think people will eventually learn to like do the fight. You know, like I think it's gonna take time. Like, you know, maybe not everyone's gonna be able to kill in the first week or like the first like month or maybe even first few months. But I think eventually more and more people will kind of see this as like a long-term challenge and will like consistently go for it. And I think we're gonna see more people like, you know, investing the time into it. Because I actually think like, in a way, I can't say this with absolute certainty because I haven't killed it yet myself. Our group has only gotten to the Zaitan phase, but I actually find the Suwon fight to be a lot more like methodical, if that makes any sense. Like you always have to do the same thing over and over again. Whereas like fights like in Doom CM, there's always a degree of randomness that you can't really control, right? Like you can try to control and you can usually control it to a significant degree, but there's always a level of randomness in there. Whereas this fight, if you do it enough times, and it's like you said, if you do genuinely like understand the fight and you've like seen the mechanics enough, it's the same thing over and over again. So people will eventually make progress. And I think it's a form of progression that I think makes sense, right? Because like once you like get the first phase down, it's like Sneb said, like once you finish the crabs, like you know how to do the crabs, right? And you're probably not going to mess it up too often unless someone's just like not paying attention. Maybe someone like gave them a phone call in the middle of the fight, like that sort of thing. So I don't know. I think it's really cool. And I think it would be really interesting because I think we're thinking of this fight in a very isolated chamber, right? Like, because this is the only fight like this that exists in the game right now. But if they introduce similar mechanics to other areas of the game, so for even like, let's say like in the story, right? Like needing to like be in a
I like
green
that.
circle at a certain point in the story, people will start to understand that mechanic as like this is just something that exists in the game. And then when they get into like, you know, these instance fights and stuff, they're not going to be caught off guard by it, right? Like they're going to see like a green circle and then you like you have to like stand in it. Or maybe like with certain phases in the boss fight, you have to make sure that a enemy doesn't touch a certain point, right? So you have to like almost like anti-escort in a way. So it's like I think as they introduce these mechanics into more areas of the game, these fights will just naturally become easier just because more people are equipped with the tools to beat them.
Ooh, I'm gonna counter you a little bit and
Well,
challenge
just real
you
quick,
on
so
that.
I've just got to quickly chat. You know, I'm just breaking news. I'm going to say this now. This is a clip. Emmy wants story encounters to be the same difficulty as Harvest Temple CM. I'm just gonna saying that now. We've got to we just got to get that interpretation there. Quote: I want Harvest Temple CM to be end boss in the story. You get gate kept out of the story unless you do Harvest Temple CM. Yeah, that. Look,
and while you're at it, permadeath too. While you're at it, if you fail the story, you just lose the game. You have to start over.
Oh, you lose all your gem store skins, and they lock again. You have to re-unlock them if you die. Yeah, there you go.
And you know what? Even more. There's only a chance for them to unlock when you rebuy them.
Oh wow! Is that, yeah,
so
sometimes your gems just get burned and you just can't. It just does nothing.
Like when you go to the vending machine.
Yeah, you've been corrupted by the Dragon Void. Sometimes the Dragon Void just consumes your gems.
Yeah.
It's like random encounters on Neopets. Oh shit! The fucking MSPP showed up and it took all my inventory and like whatever the other shit was. Why can't we have that in Guild Wars 2? Why can't we have random encounters that just show up and like delete your skins and like take your gold and like holy shit, that would be great. Please, ArenaNet.
Okay. Let's go ahead, Sneb. Let's just continue with your thought.
So my challenge was actually going to be that I think that a lot of these mechanics do exist in other places. For example, the green circles. If you look at the junkyard meta in EOD, where you have to go and hide behind those like junk piles, that's essentially the green circle mechanic. You hide behind there, or you get clapped and you die. The problem for me is that they're not punishing in the same way, and so I think it's harder to learn because there's not an advantage to doing it correctly. If that makes sense. Because in Harvest Temple CM, the advantage to doing it correctly is you get past the crab, right? But the advantage of doing the clap correctly is you just don't have to waypoint, or you don't have to wait till someone reses you. So it's not as consequential. And so I think there's a bit of a disconnect there. I think perhaps if you're going through the story and you're doing metas and open world, you encounter these mechanics, but you don't really internalize them or think about them as much because they're not as consequential to your gameplay. So I think it's really difficult to say, oh yeah, like we could put these in other places. But if you put those in other places and make them consequential, you're making it too hard for those game modes. But if you don't make them consequential, then people won't really learn them as well when they do get to that end game. So that ramp up is actually very difficult and tender to try to get right.
No, I mean, I agree with that. I was mostly thinking, like, actually, if they released more strike missions, that's more along the lines of what I was thinking. I was kind of using open world story as kind of like an addition to that. But, like, I would actually argue, ever since they started releasing the strike CMs, I think the overall skill in the player base, especially in the end game, like, portion, like, I guess, like, more veteran players, more experienced players, has actually gotten much higher. Like, I feel like I can, like, join a lot of pug groups now and be able to clear, like, maybe not Anka CM, but at least Anka CM or like Aetherblade Hideout CM. And most groups will be able to do it pretty well. Like you can see like across the board, people's like damage numbers are start getting higher because it's like you said, people are getting punished now, right? It's like if you
Yep.
don't have a certain damage, you can't clear the boss. So then more people are kind of like rising to that challenge. And then
Yep.
same thing, like, you have to do the green circle mechanic in Aether Blade Hideout, otherwise you die. So then people are getting more exposed to those types of mechanics. So I think you're right. I think, like, open world is probably not the best vessel, so to speak, to like teach people that kind of knowledge, but it exists. And I think having it be more prevalent, and I think a really big thing is to have it be a bit more consistent across different game modes, different raids and stuff would go a really long way. Because right now it's like green circles are kind of just like this universal indicator of like stand in here. But then there's also green circles that you can ignore, such as like on VG, or there's like green circles that you only need like a few people to stand in, or like if you stand in it, nothing really all that bad happens. So it's like, feels like sometimes you get mixed signals when you look at
That's
like
true.
certain visual indicators.
Yeah. So I actually think that we're slightly missing the point with this angle. We're talking, what you guys are talking about is about learning how the fight works. But I think what's actually going to cause, and what does cause problems, in my opinion, with Harvest Temple CM, and what will ultimately, I think, be the deciding factor on if you beat it or if you lose, is actually your game mechanics, right? Is how good are you at the game mechanically is what's going to screw you.
Yeah.
Harvest Temple mechanics are, they're not just easy. I'll go further. They are trivial, right? They are extremely easy. Stand in a green circle. Spread. Don't touch the red shit, right? Kill an ad, walk here, move out, right? This is not hard, right? They are trivial is the best word I can use to describe
Isolated, they're trivial, but they compound so hard.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the issue.
That's the point, though, right? Like the thing that gatekeeps you and the thing that will ultimately dictate if you're going to win or lose is your mechanical skill at the game. It is not, even the DPS check, by the way, if you look at kills, again, the kills that have happened from Snowcross, from Hardstuck, from Mycadic Asylum, the DPS check isn't actually relevant, right? It's not even that. That really gets you. For example, in the final phase, which is considered to be the hardest, you can potentially get 3 sets of green circles. Every single team that's killed it has done so much damage that you've skipped the 3rd set of green circles, right? Because, again, the damage check isn't the thing that gets you. Even though it is a high damage check compared to other encounters in the game, what really gets you is how well can you pilot the game? How well can you do a mechanic, go in a green circle while hitting the boss? How well can you position so you're not getting cleaved while attacking the boss? How aware are you of what's going on? Can you not troll your teammates? Can you watch out? Can you be aware of the crabs moving in? Can you not get hit by the random AoEs that are getting spewed out? How well can you survive? It's like, it's a gauntlet, right? Like the entire fight is a really long gauntlet of not being dead while doing your job at the same time. And if anyone screws up, you immediately die, right? And that is actually much harder to get good at than learning mechanics. In a sense, I agree with both of you, okay? I'm here. Fence at a teapot, right? I think Emmy is absolutely right here. I love the idea of introducing like greens, and even with the cool telegraphing with like the spinny thing, right? That indicates when it's good, right? And when there are enough people in it. I think stuff like that is really, really cool. I like always using the same AoE indicators, right? Like the same telegraphs for all of these moves. But in a way, that will get you to step 1. But the thing that's really going to dictate if you succeed is if you have good enough mechanics to actually beat the encounter. And I view that as a really big distinction between anything else in the game right now. You don't need to be mechanically good at the game to beat Doom CM or Kadim CM. You do need to be mechanically good at the game to beat Harvest Temple CM. That is, I would say, the key distinction between Harvest Temple Challenge Mode and everything else in the game right now. Which is a difficult, it's a hard mountain, right? Like Harvest Temple CM, it is hard. I'm not going to meme, right? Like a lot of kind of try-hard players will say, yeah, Doom CM is easy, right? Which is actually true, by the way. You can beat it with 5 people. You can beat it with 5 people. Well, maybe not anymore, actually, because everything got nerfed, but, you can beat it with 5 people. You can certainly do it with 6 now, for sure, and easily 7. Honestly, Harvest Temple, Challenge Mode, Low Man, doable, I think, but extremely difficult. I mean, even doing it with 10 is extremely difficult. You can't get away with stuff on that encounter. Like, that's the difference to me.
Yeah, you're right. The mechanical difficulty is up there. Like if you don't have a lot of dexterity with your hands and like can move quickly, and it's gonna be really hard. Like really, really, really hard. Borderline impossible. Like I've been doing this with some players who I consider to be really, really strong players, and they're making mistakes and they're dying, and it's actually almost weird for me to see this happen, because when I play raids with these players, they never die, they never make a mistake. And then we go into Harvest Temple CM, and it's like, oh, I moved too early, I'm dead. Or oh, I pressed W, I went 1 inch outside the green, we're all dead. And it's so weird because these are the some of the best mechanical players in the game, and they're still fallible. They still make mistakes. So if you've never experienced something like this before, you're going to jump into this and you're going to get absolutely pulverized. It's going to be so impossibly difficult because the mechanical intensity is so high, and it's like juggling, right? Like I think about the normal mode strikes is you've got 2 balls. You're throwing one in the air, you're tossing the other one to the hand, you're catching it. And then maybe some of the CM raids, it's 3 balls, right? That's kind of hard or whatever. Harvest Temple is like 6, right? You've got 6 balls in the air, and at any point in time, you could drop one of them, and if you drop it, the entire audience gasps, and you all have to restart the entire show. It's tough. It's really tough.
Really interesting. Maybe this is a bit of a tangent, but I remember when Ankasium came out, we kind of touched on like similar ideas where it's like Ankasium for those that were already mechanically very like familiar with the game, or people that were very familiar with like moving while also doing damage and like being able to see things in their peripheral vision. Ankasium was very trivial, right? For like those types of players, other than like the CM where you had the very strict DPS check. I actually feel like Harvest Temple in a way is kind of like combining all of like the difficult things from the previous 3 and kind of like jacking it up, because like Ankasium, like big emphasis on like moving while also paying attention to mechanics. Kaineng CM was like a lot about positioning, like you had to make sure you were standing in a very specific area, otherwise people would just die. And then Aetherblade Hideout was, I think that was like the first time people actually got like punished by not having a DPS check. So I feel like all 3 of these things that made the previous 3 CMs really difficult are now all existing in Harvest Temple, and it's like you guys said, it's like the compounding of all of these different things and needing to juggle so many things at once, and what makes it so difficult. But I don't know, I still think it's really cool, and I'm still optimistic. I think, you know, the same players that you're saying is like are messing up this kind of stuff, this is in a way just the anime training arc for them, right? Like they're eventually going to get really good and they're going to be able to beat it. So
yeah.
If you keep at it, it'll make you a better player. If you keep at it, I don't think that's super exciting, actually. If you keep grinding this, you will get better at the game. And I think that's an awesome thing, because it's going to open up way more avenues to you. You know, you're going to have an easier time trying out new game modes and learning new builds and learning new things, because this is such a fantastic, interesting topic, in my opinion, because I think the way most players look at the game is kind of wrong. I'm very hesitant to use that word. I've been in trouble with that word before. But the way that people approach the game tends to be that you learn how exactly one thing works, and you learn only that. You don't learn why or how. And this means that every time you learn a new build, you start from scratch, and you have to like, okay, I'm going to learn that, then I'm going to learn that, I'm going to learn that. If you get better at the game mechanically, you have such like a baseline that you can pick up things way quicker. For example, very experienced and skilled raid players would be very confident simply playing any build, even if they've never played it before, without a rotation, and basically just kind of mashing buttons, right? And you'll probably get an okay result, right? For example, you know, like a really good raid player would outperform almost everyone in the game on a build they've never played before, just because of their mechanical ability, right? And just pressing buttons. The same is true in PvP, right? Really good PvP players can play bad builds or even builds they aren't familiar with and still perform well just because they know how the game works, right? And I think Harvest Temple CM making players better at the game is very cool in that regard, because it gives people a good overview of how to approach everything else in the game, right? As opposed to just one specific thing.
I kind of agree with that. I truly believe that the only way to actually get mechanically good at Guild Wars 2 on a really deep and complex level is either to play PvP and get farmed and like watch really good players play PvP and learn from them, or to like solo dungeons or watch other people solo dungeons, because there's so much complexity. It's not just about like moving and doing damage. It's about like managing where you are on terrain. Like what advantage can the terrain give you from like the position that you're in? Like max meleeing, like where do you do that? The Primordius, like where you can stand, and I think is it Primordius where you can stand like over to the side outside of the red hitbox and you can max melee like relatively safely from one of the attacks. I think it's Primordius. I don't remember. But like there's a lot of stuff there, and like using acid bomb, canceling acid bomb so you don't fly off the platform, using acid bomb and like binding that to like look back so you fly into a green and like your camera switches automatically. Like that's all like PvP trickery that people do, like when like you're throwing grenades or mortar kit backwards while you're running away
Mhm.
and your camera's toggled. Like this is like 5-head stuff that you probably won't just learn like if you go do a raid. Like you could be really experienced at raids or fractals, but raids overall are like very much stand here and press buttons, and fractals are very much get carried by the potions and by the heal firebrand. And there's not a lot of content that's just brutally unforgiving if you
Mm.
don't understand the game like mechanically, like how the engine works and all this other stuff. And there are very few areas where you can learn that. And so again, like I've said this before, I think the reason why raids get solved so quickly and why they did like at the launch of the game is because the people that were raiding then and the people that like instantly cleared raids, people killed like Veil Guardian during the beta event hours after it went live because they were really good players in dungeons and they read traits. Like you had a engineer tanking with adaptive armor and like cool stuff, and there were different people that figured out different ways to do it. But yeah, I totally agree that this is a fight where if you don't understand kind of the tricks and the gimmicks and the way that combat and movement and like terrain and all that stuff actually works, then you're really at a disadvantage. And this also plays into people who say, well, I have 5,000 hours on Guardian and I'm a raider and I'm in a raid guild. I should be able to do Harvest Temple. Well, when your 5,000 hours on Guardian have been using Spear and pressing like Whirling Wrath on a boss in a corner, you've literally just been playing the here's a good meme. This is a good meme. You haven't been playing for 5,000 hours. You've been playing 1 hour 5,000 times. It's a legendary armor meme right there.
Nice.
But it's like for real though.
No,
It's
that's a good way, very good way of putting it. Actually, to be honest, that's a really good way to put it.
Actually,
That's a very good
it's
way to
like
put it. Yeah, holy shit.
you have it's like you have 10 hours of experience, but for 500 instances of that. Like me, like and like the people that do dungeons, like I go into raw pugs. Like this is my favorite thing to do. I'll just go into a raw and put up an LFG that says like path 2 smiley face my first time, and people will join that shit so fast looking to show off. And you'll have thieves and guardians that are blinking through walls and like doing all this like skill shot stuff, and like players like that like are god tier, and there aren't very many of them, and you can't even see them stand out in content like raids. This is like the only content where you can see that level of skill actually stand out and shine and confuse people that don't understand it. But yeah, that's my monologue. Sorry about that. I went on for a while.
Yeah, it's a good monologue.
it was a good one, actually. I really agree with that. I mean, I think that as a player, having not beaten HTCM, but having done, how much time have I spent on that? Maybe 15 to 20 hours now. It's nothing crazy, but it's been quite a bit of time trying it with friends. I think I've become a way stronger player way better, like way better, because I'm being challenged constantly. I'm forced to push myself to the limit. Like at the beginning, I was struggling to control the mech while I was going to the greens and stuff. It forced me to get better at
Yeah.
targeting and control and microing the mech.
Mm.
Then I got better at communicating with my team, because we would start to make mistakes. Like I would say, "Hey, don't worry, I'm going to teleport." Too vague, right? Somebody's like, "Oh, he's going to teleport right in front of me, so I don't have to go further behind." And then the spread mechanic fails and we reset. So I've had to work on so many of these different skills. I've naturally become a lot stronger of a player. And I think that's it for me. I love that because I like improving at stuff. I don't have to be the best. I just like being the best I can be. And when something enables me to get better, I think that's pretty cool. Even if I can't beat it, that's totally fine. Yeah.
Yep.
That's kind of something else that I'll just tack on to the end of that real fast. There's stuff again in raids and Harvest Temple where I feel like this, like specifically with Heal Mechanist, is the first time that I've seen any of this shit for a long time. But combos, you can do some really insane like burst heal and might combos. You can shoot down like Elixir Gun 5, Acid Bomb, cancel it, and you blast like cleanse. You can shoot down like your mortar kit, like Waterfield. You can blast that. You can switch to health kit and use like 5-3-4 for blast, and then you can auto attack. You can chain all this stuff together and use it to stack up boons and to cleanse all at the same time. Or you can use Acid Bomb for like mobility because the cooldown is relatively short, and you can track. There are areas where you can like mentally keep up with cooldowns based off of what other cooldowns are at, based on like rotating through them. And there's like so much room for skills that have been dead for the longest time because the content just hasn't required it. And another thing too is like with blast finishers, like people don't don't know what that is. Like they don't know what it does. Like when I go into again a raw and like seeing a pug whenever I black powder and switch to short bow and blast it, seeing a pug that switches to like hammer on guardian and uses mighty blow into it, I'm just like, oh god, you get it, thank you. And then there are the people that just run out of shadow refuge whenever you throw it down despite explaining it. Or you've stacked up stealth and you're already running and then they shadow refuge on top of you. But it's
Yeah, so
this is good. Yeah, this
so
is good.
so
This is
after
good
this
content.
slightly long tangent on player skill level, I want to circle it round to one really big question that I think is super interesting and is in fact maybe the really important question here.
Yep.
Was Harvest Temple Challenge Mode worth it for ArenaNet? Or rather, not was, is it worth it for ArenaNet? Because I hate to be that guy. We gotta rip off the band. We gotta rip off the band-aid here. That was probably a lot of development hours, right? It's a complicated encounter. It's significantly different from the normal mode and how it kind of operates. Like some abilities were redesigned, right? It had to be tested, debugged. It's a fucking giant ass fucking fight, right? Like it takes 12 minutes to kill it, right? Or some kind of crazy shit, right? It's an absolute monster. They even delayed it to debug it a bit more because kind of overlook. That wasn't that good, was it? So was it worth it? Because ultimately that question is the answer to that question is the same as the answer to the question, will we ever see anything like that ever again? Okay. Because if it's not worth it, that ain't coming back.
It has to be worth it.
I'll be the first one to say I think it was worth it, and maybe not necessarily in the sense like monetarily was it worth it? Did they make a lot of money from this? In fact, I would actually argue pretty sure they lost money because development, especially at like in high cost of living areas, is extremely expensive, especially given like the amount of time that they've sunk into this. But I think it is the start, or at the very least, they're signaling to the player base like we're going to be investing more into this. And I think a better question would be to ask like, is Harvest Temple in addition to all of the other changes that they've been making to endgame, is that worth it? And I think that one to me is definitely a yes, because we haven't talked about it at all yet, but at the same time they released Harvest Temple, they also released the emboldened mode for raids and stuff, right? And I think that has been really, really, really good for funneling new players into this kind of content. And it's because when people see people doing like difficult stuff, like in Harvest Temple, I've had a lot of people come into my like stream and be like, hey, is this kind of stuff, can I do this? Like, do I need to like do a lot of like, you know, put a lot of effort into this? And I usually tell them, yeah, this is really hard, but you won't know what you can do. You can do the emboldened raids, because it'll make it a lot easier for you to like see what type of content exists in this game. So I don't know. I'm of the opinion, I think yes. And I think we're probably going to talk about it later. The balance patch, I think in theory, this like the goal of those balance patches would, you know, further feed into that, lowering the skill floor so that more players can get into this kind of content. So then more players are playing it, so more players are spending money, and then therefore more development into this kind of stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to jump in there really quick to say that, because I believe that very strongly. Yeah.
What do you think, Snub?
It's absolutely worth it. Okay, I'm thinking of this from the consumer marketing perspective. Okay, think about this. They paid. This is gonna sound so harsh, but they paid. It was Max, right?
It was indeed the
paid
very
Max.
same.
Somebody's got to link the video in the chat or something, or in the YouTube video. But they paid Max to put a banner ad and play the trailer on his stream. With the audience that Max has, I imagine that costs them thousands of dollars. Thousands. Max literally was like on his phone or something while the trailer played. And and I don't know. And that was it. That was the marketing. Then they go and they make a piece of content that is really challenging, that would appeal to someone like Max. Max hears about this purely from word of mouth. And Max is interested and invites TeaTime, a very, very big content creator in the Guild Wars 2 community.
Thank you. True.
Maybe the biggest, right?
Very true. Very true.
And then suddenly, Guild Wars 2 has thousands of eyes on it, and people are coming to this stream for the first time. They're coming to other people's streams in the Guild Wars 2 category. Hey, how do I get into this game? Heard about this game from Max. This is huge advertising, and it's very hard to quantify. That's the trick. This is very hard to quantify because it's not like there was some special link or something. And so when you're going through all the data, it's going to be really hard to link it back to Harvest Temple CM. But I think this has done a lot of good. Look at all the names that have popped into different people's chats and are talking about Guild Wars 2. Why are they talking about Guild Wars 2? Because Guild Wars 2 just had something really big happen. There was a big storyline. This is huge. This is massive. Word of mouth is one of the most powerful marketing tools. There is a reason that people, well, I don't know if anyone knows about this, but there are companies that will try to pay you to put good reviews on Amazon and stuff. They're like, please, you bought our product. We will literally pay you to do it. Now, you're not supposed to do that, but they will because it matters so much. Word of mouth is huge. People hearing positivity about Guild Wars 2, it's massive. It's massive. Way better than any banner ad will ever do, especially for things like retention in the game. So I think this was a big deal. Big deal.
I was going to say, I think another really big thing is Guild Wars 2 has had a really bad reputation for a really long time, right? It's like, oh, that game is dead. They haven't gotten like a new raid in such a long time. Like they're like laying off developers, like everyone's leaving the game. People are like playing new games. So I think there's been a lot of damage done to that word of mouth and the opposite direction. So this is kind of like almost like the tide kind of like changing directions, right? It's like now there's a lot of positive buzz about it. Like you hear a lot of people saying very positive things. Like, yeah, EOD has already outsold POF. The Harvest Temple Strike mission is like the most difficult content that they've ever released into the game. There's like a whole race for world's first, and there's all this like positive like word of mouth now that's countering.
Yes,
and I think
negative word of mouth kills, absolutely kills. So if you can shift that, huge.
Yeah, and I think another really big thing is like you're starting to change the minds of people that have heard that negative word of mouth. Like I've like spoken to like old like university friends that never really played the game because they were like, I heard that it was gonna die soon or something like that. And I was like, no. It's like it's getting like a new expansion. It's getting a lot of like new content and stuff. And they're like, oh wait, really? Then maybe I'll like give it a try. You know? So it's like a lot of people that previously believed that the game is dying are now changing their minds. And at the very least, you know, maybe not saying anything negative about it anymore, which is already doing the game a lot of favors. So
I personally think that instead of making hard content that's going to get picked up by hardcore WoW Raider streamers and stuff like that, and instead of paying money for banner ads, I think ArenaNet should consider partnering with bubble tea shops that are only in one county in one state. Quiznos subs that is basically effectively completely defunct and gone. And I think we should also probably put in some plastic cups at Hardee's, even though 80% of them are out of business.
So can I actually defend that for a second? This is probably going to
No.
sound really weird. I want to defend those choices slightly.
Really?
Yes, because I think
This is where our player base hangs out. We're going straight to them.
No. But that's not what it's about. I think a lot of people get this confused. I think they're not paying those companies; they're partnering with those companies, which means they're not necessarily paying big money to be on a Hardee's cup. They're trying to get some more eyes on it. And in some cases, maybe companies are paying them to get their audience to go to their bubble tea shop or whatever. This is a free-to-play MMO, and some of those things may have been exploration type things to see how they can bring in additional revenue given the audience that they have. I think we can meme that into oblivion, and I mean I agree. 100%. If they're trying to get more people to play Guild Wars 2, advertising to a bubble tea shop that only exists in one state is perhaps the strangest thing ever. But if they're trying to make some extra money and that's an experiment for them, because Guild Wars 2 is free to play, and they were at the time, I believe they were releasing a ton, like Living World content was it, right? And it was all free. So if you think about it from that perspective, they were trying to find additional revenue sources using the audience that they have. And to me, that actually makes sense. But when you look at it without thinking about it, it doesn't make any sense at all.
I agree. You're actually completely right. And I think in addition to that, they should provide taxi cabs to take people from the restaurants to the bubble tea place. And they should do trivia questions inside the taxi cabs.
Yeah, that one was weird.
In motion. But it's interesting because, again, like my friend, he would probably enjoy playing this game at a really high level. He just didn't know that it was a thing. And it literally just took me showing him and him happening to be like a really skilled raider. But the marketing for this game has been so weird since the beginning. It's just been weird. And I don't feel like they've ever done themselves any favors. And even though like you make good points, Neb, how like partnership and like maybe it doesn't cost a lot of money and maybe it goes both ways. Like maybe I go to Hardee's and buy a cheeseburger so I can get my Guild Wars 2 cup, or maybe I don't because the closest Hardee's is an hour and a half away in Dallas traffic. But it also opens up like flaming on Reddit. Having Max interview Teapot, like there probably wasn't much flaming going on, and it probably got a lot of upvotes on Reddit.
So no, actually, I think people were really happy with that stuff.
Yeah,
like really happy.
Yeah,
right. It's the perception of the onlookers matters too, and I don't know. This is.
I mean, we could go on this huge tangent, but I agree with you. I think in short, that's where a community manager or a PR person comes in, and they help sort of temper the frustration with that, because people just don't understand, right? It's about educating and communicating in a way that's not condescending or not too deep. It just gives people the information they need to know and allows people to understand the decisions that are being made. Otherwise, it absolutely looks like they're making terrible decisions, which I would venture that people in marketing make mistakes quite a lot, because that's basically how marketing works. But I would venture to say that some of those were very calculated. Some of those endeavors were very calculated and aren't as bad as people make them out to be nowadays.
Well, marketing aside, do you think that ArenaNet or let's imagine imaginary world 6 months down the line, 250 people have beaten this. Do you think ArenaNet's okay with that?
I think it's absolutely getting nerfed. The question is, will they release content like this again?
Okay.
And that might be a hot topic. I look, I don't want it to get nerfed. I just think there's no question that it will.
Oh, really? You think it will get nerfed?
There's no way they keep it. There's no way. Because eventually it will become very dead.
Yes. And so it'll be hard to kind of get a group even, right? Because people won't even try it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like, look, if I ever beat this thing, there's no way in hell I'm doing it again.
Really?
Because like you've achieved victory. That's it. You got all the rewards. There's no way that I'm going to spend 50 hours again to beat it. There's no way. Unless there's like a close friend that asks for my help or whatever. But there's no way I'm going to like prog it again is what I'm trying to get at. Mm-hmm. So
progging it is definitely very painful.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I've mentioned it before, but I don't know if they'll necessarily nerf it, but one of the things that I know they've done in the past, so if you've done Fractals before, you've probably heard of Twilight Oasis. The final boss at the time was really difficult, right? Like Amala was like probably the hardest fight that had existed in the game at the time. And what they did is they added a checkpoint, right? It's like you do the first half of the boss and then you get to the lightning phase. And then once you get there, if you wipe, you immediately start at the lightning phase and then you can see the second half of the fight. I would really like to see something like that implemented for Harvest CM. Like if they, after like, once kind of like the prestige has died down, most people have gotten it, not that many people are doing it again, they could add some sort of like soft checkpoint. So let's say like you get to like the orb pushing or the second orb pushing phase with like the bees and all that kind of stuff. That means you've probably already like slugged through like, the primordial phase like quite a long time. You've probably like been beaten up by the crowds like a million times. So by that point, you kind of have a basic understanding of the fight. But I think the second half of the fight is extremely difficult in a lot of different ways. Like I remember my group, when we got to Zaitan, we were all like so hyped. We were literally screaming in Discord, like, we got it, we're finally here and everything. And then immediately 6 of us got kicked off the side by the Giants. And it was just like instant despair because they're like, oh, we finally got here. We didn't even get to see any mechanics because we just got destroyed by the Giants because we didn't know like we needed stability for that. So it's like, I think that could be like, I think almost like a compromise, right? Where it's like, you don't necessarily nerf the fight, but you make it so that people are less disheartened. Like it's like almost a reward without actually being a reward. It's like, okay, you got past this phase, so you don't need to worry about this phase anymore. So maybe a hot take, but I know they've done it in the past, right? It's like there's actually an instance in the game where they have implemented this exact same thing before. So I could see how it, I don't know. I could see if
they have to nerf it. Like I think they have no choice, right?
They have to.
No. Hear me out. Okay, when they release content like this for World of Warcraft, eventually it becomes easier because the gear becomes better. And so more people have access to that content. Sure. It makes sense for them to try it. It won't be nearly as hard. In Guild Wars 2, that's not the case. You either have to depend on power creep, so the game becoming significantly easier over time because they make everything stronger, or you have to have some other reason to go back to it. Like there's got to be some other reason, but it's not going to happen probably. So what this means is that over time, as more and more of the skilled players complete this and help their friends complete it and whatever, fewer and fewer people are going to be willing to engage in groups like this because it's so time consuming. So in my mind, after a certain period of time, letting people have this experience of progging it, they'll probably nerf it down to some extent. I actually think the most appropriate nerf is exactly what Emmy just described, because then it retains all of the character of the fight and sort of but without being so punishing. So if there was one checkpoint halfway through the fight, and if you get that in the same instance that you're doing, then it pauses on that one and lets you start from there.
Yeah,
I would be okay with that, but not right when the thing comes out or anything. Let it go for a month or two, and then we'll see. Right? Maybe they have data that shows how many people have completed it, and they put a
it's a big brain
threshold
idea.
on it.
I do like Emmy's idea a lot there. You know, I think you wait maybe 2 to 3 months and then you add this checkpoint system in. I don't know how hard that will be to code. I think it'll be really good because you're absolutely right. Like the thing about that is it's very interesting is that the original experience still exists, right? You can still do it from A to B without dying, and you'll never engage with the checkpoint. Because the concern I have about nerfing it is always there's gonna be this one guild that they're on the final phase at 20%, and they're like, okay, we're going to bed, we're coming back tomorrow, right? We're gonna blast it down, and it gets nerfed. The HP's down, right? Or
sucks.
they remove a mechanic, or they do whatever. And then that guild is like, wow, what the fuck, right? You know,
I really don't.
Your
like
effort is totally invalidated, right? Basically, you know, you don't get the payoff, right? Because you've been grinding for weeks and slowly, you know, working it down, and then they nerf it the day before you kill it, or like, you know, like a few days before they kill it, or something like that, right? And all of a sudden, it's just wow, you know, just it's gonna feel awful. But having that checkpoint system is really cool because you can still beat the original version, right? If you want to, it's still there. And you know, it then becomes a lot easier to progress, right? The progression component becomes a lot easier for everyone else, because ultimately, if you look at the progression streams, a lot of it was just wiping before you get to the final boss, right? You know, you grinding the consistency is the really hard part on a fight like that, because if anyone makes a mistake, well, you're going again. It's going to take you 10 minutes to get back to where you were, right? So good luck. So yeah, I think it's a very elegant solution, for sure. I guess what you would do is just to, you know, what I would say is just make it so that if you want to get the title, you have to do it in one go, right? Yeah. For example, right? But the progression element of getting the kill, getting the achievement, getting the loot, unlocking the skin, unlocking the infusion, I think that's perfectly acceptable if you have a checkpoint system like that added. But just make it so that if you want to get Voidwalker, you must do it all in one go, right? Like you can't do it with checkpoints.
Yeah, I think also a really big thing that I think a lot of people are missing is we're kind of seeing this as like a one-hit wonder, right? It's like you complete it once and then you get the prestige. But I think ArenaNet's goal with this is actually for this to be repeatable content, right? It's like they increase the weekly rewards for doing the strike mission CMs. They increase, like, you know, just in general, they added like loot drops to like the table and everything. I'm pretty sure their goal with this is not to have this be so difficult that you only want to do it, kind of like Snub said, right? Like just doing it once and then never doing it again. I'm like pretty sure that's not the goal, which is why I see people saying like, you know, oh, if they do like the checkpoint system, they have the soft mode system, they should take away the rewards. And I heard a lot of people saying similar things about Emboldened, right? It's like, oh, if you do Emboldened, you should get lesser rewards, that sort of thing. I think that's very counterintuitive to like their end goal, right? Which is they want more players to do this kind of content so they can justify putting more of this type of content into the game. And I think just like I mostly brought up the checkpoint ideas. I'm not trying to like say, oh, this is like a big brain idea. I'm only bringing it up because they've done it in the past. This is not like a new thing for them. They likely already have like development, like systems in place to implement something similar for this type of encounter. So I think it's like, it's just I don't know. I feel like it's pretty realistic. You know, it's like if you had the ability to like, you know, wipe halfway through and then still continue and finish the boss, I think that would make a lot more people inclined to try it again, right? Because you don't need to sit through. I mean,
brutal.
It's not as yeah. You don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to sit through 5 to 10 minutes every single time a single person messes up.
Oh,
so
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So this is where things get tricky, because the entire reason that this was so notable and received so much positive feedback, I think, was because the storyline of it being so difficult and having all these people attempt it. But the problem is with what you said to me is I don't see any evidence aside from the reward that ArenaNet wants this to be repeatable. If the reward suggests they want this to be done within an hour, but the problem is that I've done it for 20 hours and haven't beat it. So the rewards would have to be astronomically high, or they'd have to put that checkpoint in this checkpoint system in, and people would have to naturally get better at it over time so they could clear it weekly.
Yeah.
But I just have a hard time seeing that right now, and I think that's because, you know, is that recency bias kind of? I don't know. I just look at it.
I'm gonna have to.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to debate you here. Actually, it is repeatable. Actually, so I re-cleared it.
Yeah, I agree.
Just the other
But
day.
is it worth repeating? Like, if they want it to
Yes,
be
it will be.
repeatable, then people.
In a few weeks' time, within a few weeks, the team that I'm playing with will be killing it first or second try. You could definitely say that it deserves more gold, and I agree with you actually. I think they could maybe nudge the gold to 12 or even 16, if they wanted
50.
to, or maybe just like add double antique summoning stones for it, or even triple antique summoning stones. But you can beat it consistently, right? You absolutely can. If you once you beat it for the first time, if you really did it well and you learned it, you will be able to beat it, and it will be time efficient too. Once you get to that level, once you get to a high enough level, I think in a way it is supposed to be repeated, but not by a lot of players.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
If they want this to be, most players aren't going to even attempt to repeat it because of the time they put in to get it the one time. And the rewards currently are not worth somebody getting halfway through and putting the red down incorrectly and you reset, or messing up the giant stealth and resetting. And then suddenly you're 2 hours in, you're like, well, I could have just AFK'd at whatever event and gotten this gold by now. The rewards are no longer worth it. So the risk reward to me actually currently isn't worth it, but it may become worth it over time. I don't know. I just have a really hard time envisioning a world where I don't think pickup groups will do this ever in its current state. And even what you're describing, I think, is problematic, because that assumes that the entirety of your group will be available to do this every time. And that might be the case, but only for a very small number of groups. If you change even 2 people out, it drastically changes everything because of how many variables there are going on in that fight. For example, I've been playing the heal mech that's taking out all the reds and stuff. If I leave and they have to get a new heal mech to do all that stuff, they have to prog that heal mech back to the place that we've gotten to. It's a lot of work. And so I find it very hard to believe that people are going to be able to repeat this consistently with the same groups unless it changes in some meaningful way.
I think it can be
I
both.
guess maybe.
Oh yeah, so go ahead, Emmy.
I was just gonna say, I feel like maybe I didn't get my point across completely. I didn't mean just Harvest Temple. I meant all of the Strike CMs, right? Like not just Strike CMs, but even like raids to a certain degree, almost to like the same degree of repeatability that we see fractals, right? Because right now fractals, I would argue, are like. Can they hear me trash talking them now? Can they hear me calling them bad players and small brain players that don't understand my points? No.
Whoa.
What?
What they did? They heard all of that. And, I really apologize for this stuff, guys. Emmy is just totally out of control. Like jumping around over there, just wiggling. Okay, it is. No, I apologize. Sneb's taking a back seat because there's a new toxic overlord in Guild Wars 2. There is going to be a twit longer with a Reddit thread coming shortly. But anyway, after a slight internet fold there, I mean, it happens, guys. It happens. It really does. Emmy, recall what you were saying around a minute ago and go again.
I remember, I think I cut out when I was talking about like fractals as an example, where it's like really repeatable in the sense like, when it's not nearly the same level. Like 100 CM is not nearly the same as Harvest Temple, right? But you still see people clearing it super consistently. And you kind of see like the overall skill in that game mode kind of increasing to the point where it is repeatable. And my point was with like the strike missions, like not just Harvest Temple, but all of the strike missions kind of as a whole, I can kind of see in it moving in the direction where they want a similar sort of like reaction there. It's like, I think already Aetherblade Hideout, I've been doing it every week with pug groups and they've been able to do it really consistently, right? And then same same thing with Anka CM. I've been doing it maybe like every other week if I like see a pug group doing it, and they've been able to clear it really consistently. I think Kinding Overlook is starting to get there because people have kind of nailed down like kind of like the heel brand baiting strat, and by that I'm going to claim credit for that. My group came up with that, and then I can imagine similar things will kind of like start happening with Harvest Temple. Again, I don't think it's going to happen right away. I don't think this is going to be like a short-term thing that happens, but I think if they continue releasing this type of content into the game, and if the expectation is now there where it's like, this kind of stuff is like, repeatable, it's farmable, it's worth learning how to do, it's worth like, learning how to play the game in this super specific way, then I think it'll naturally start seeing more people. So, yeah.
Honestly, I don't think they're going to nerf it, and I don't think they should, because pugs are going to figure it out. It's going to be puggable, even though we all don't believe that. And Teapot especially, Sneb especially. But I said that about raids. I used to think that it would never be puggable. And even ArenaNet with no updraft Gorseval. It's kind of like, technically it'll be possible, but we don't really think it will be. But now that's just the way you do it. If I'm completely honest, I think people will just pug it and it'll be fine. And they may nerf it a little bit. It wouldn't surprise me if they nerfed it a little bit. Or if they, like, I could see the Salt Spray Dragon champion being a part where they implement a checkpoint. I think that would be a really good place for a checkpoint to be. Or just adding Emboldened. But it definitely is repeatable if you're skilled enough. And all raids are. And you can have raids of really skilled people that throw on Veil Guardian and Gorseval for hours because they're just not paying attention. It's just that this requires a lot more focus because people aren't comfortable with it yet. But I do think it's possible that people will. Is it sellable? I don't know. I think people will probably just pug it eventually. I think it'll get there. Maybe not. Maybe
I
I'm
just
wrong.
cannot see that.
No,
there's no way.
No.
Because here's the reality. I would never go into a pug group with that ever. Like never. There are too many moments where it's like, I need a backup. If people aren't in voice, no way it's happening. There are too many instant death mechanics, and there are too many what's the word? There are too many lose conditions. There's just instant lose conditions. There's no way that it would be a healthy environment. Pug groups would really struggle, really struggle just because of that. If it changes to a certain degree and they made it slightly easier, then I think yes. But in its current form, there's just too many things that can go wrong. It's too many things to juggle for a pug group. You need so much communication.
Well, here's the curveball to that, though.
Okay.
Is that greens and Veil Guardians were mandatory, and people figured out, we can just out heal them. And updrafts on Gorseval were a thing until people realized, we can just out heal them. And there's weird stuff like that in different encounters where people may just not have found the quirks and the weirdness in Harvest Temple yet. It's entirely possible, but I don't know. There may be stuff like that in there that makes pugging significantly easier. I don't know. I may be completely wrong with this.
Yeah, to be honest, look, and this is the big elephant in the room here in this conversation, I think. Raids aren't well designed in Guild Wars 2. And actually, that's been a really big thing that I think has been keeping a lot of more hardcore players from other games away. A lot of the mechanics are essentially trivial and don't do anything. The strike missions and certainly the harder ones in particular, the challenge mode ones, they're not like fully design proofed, but they're pretty design proofed in this regard. You can't really just ignore everything. It's not going to work, especially not on Harvest Temple. And I don't know, it's really weird to keep repeating this because I feel like people should have an understanding of this because of just how long it took to kill and how hard people had to go to do this. But it really is quite difficult, guys. It's real hard.
Yeah.
It really is.
Attempt it with a pug group and tell me how it goes.
Yeah, it's
sounds harsh, but
it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult, actually. with compared to everything else in the game. There was actually some. It was absolutely fascinating. And this is another really tricky and weird thing to talk about here as well. Players are so much better at the game now than we used to be. Because players are like, wait a minute, like, didn't Doom CM take about the same time to kill? That's actually true, by the way. It did take approximately the same time. It was a lot less hours, funnily enough. People didn't go for it quite as hard. But the thing is that then the game knowledge that players had was astronomically lower than it is right now. People did not understand how to abuse the game and like how to win Guild Wars 2, right? Look, when Doom CM was out, people weren't even abusing Scourge with old Epidemic. Like our understanding was so poor, right? It was so poor of how the game actually worked back then. Like, even when this hard content was coming out, it's just not even remotely describable. If Doom CM released today, it would die within hours, right? The thing that would maybe trip people up a little bit would be the orbs, right? Like the greens, because it's kind of a weird, unintuitive mechanic. Right, it's a very weird thing. And you can say that maybe the players were mechanically better back then because everyone was a bit more tryhard. And honestly, that might be true. For example, people used to be like really tryhard in PvP, right? And obviously there isn't a pro scene anymore. So obviously you could say that the kind of mechanical tryhardingness is lower, but the game knowledge and game understanding is vastly superior in all game modes, more or less, because of just the kind of like the build up of understanding as players play the game even more and more and more and more. Like, again, back in the day, you could even argue that the peak of Guild Wars 2's kind of skill was actually in the first batches of raids, kind of like Wing 1, Wing 2, Wing 3. Those raids took a really, really long time, right? A really long time to go down. Why? Why did it take so long if the players were, like really, really good? It's because we didn't have knowledge, right? Like, knowledge is extremely powerful, right? And, I talked a little bit about how you need to be really mechanically good at the game to beat Harvest Temple CM, and that's true. But the thing is, you need mechanical skill, but you also need to understand how the game works, right? And how to win. And that's what players really lacked back in the day. Doom CM is a joke compared to Harvest Temple CM. It is laughably easy compared to Harvest Temple CM, right? And that might seem really unusual, but there is no way around that. If you put two groups onto Doom CM and Harvest Temple CM, Doom CM will die so much quicker. If you have 10 new raiders, right? And you say, right, I want, we're gonna clone you and say, right, one of you is going to progress Doom CM and the other is going to press Harvest Temple CM. It is not even a tiny, remotely, even in the same universe, right? Doom CM is going to die so much faster, right, than Harvest Temple CM because it's just so much more punishing, so much more mechanically intensive, right? And it's just so much more tightly tuned than Doom CM is.
I was gonna say, I think I actually, in a way, anecdotal evidence, I do think that's true because the same group that I'm progging Harvest Temple CM right now with, like we have about 5 or 6 players overlap. Some of them are actually fairly new raiders, and we got them Doom CM a few weeks ago, and it took us about 3 weeks, but we only met together once a week. So in essence, basically 3 days of progression, and we were able to get the Doom CM. Part of that can be attributed to, I think, people were just in general a lot more familiar with Doom mechanics, right? Like they had done the Doom boss itself a lot of times. Whereas I think right now there's just not a lot of groups that are pugging or organizing EOD strike missions on a super regular basis, the same way that I do with raid statics, or the same way I see with raid statics and stuff. So that might be kind of a mini factor in there. But I think the Doom CM was it took us 3 days. Once people kind of got used to being able to see the echo running around in their peripheral vision, there weren't too many other layers of complexity, right? Everything else was kind of very similar to the base fight. Whereas I think Harvest Temple feels in a way almost like a completely different fight. If you did the base version of Harvest Temple, I feel like it actually equips you very, very poorly for the actual CM fight. So I don't know. That's kind of like my take on that. Is I actually have a group with like pretty significant overlap that did Doom CM and Harvest Temple CM, and we're having a lot more trouble with Harvest Temple CM. I think we're coming in on about like 10 to 15 hours, and we've only gotten to Zaitan so far. So
yeah, it's intense. It's an intense fight. And it's only uphill from there. Boom, you know.
I think it would be really cool if they like kind of did almost like a, I don't know, it's the oscillation, I guess. Like, you know, they release this really hard content and then they go back to releasing like some more like easier things that people can maybe try. And then after a period of time, like, I don't know, 6 months, 7 months, something like that, then they release a really, really hard one again. That could be really cool. And then, I don't know, I just had like a really dank idea. I've talked about it with my community, but imagine if they added CMs to some of the old fights, right? It's like, imagine if on BG, if you tank the green, you like do 50% less outgoing damage or something like that. Or if you get teleported, you get like a healing reduction. And that could be really cool. I actually really like the like exposed buffs that they've implemented into Strike CMs. It could be really cool if they implemented that into the older fights to make them like you have to do them as intended. You can't just like out heal the greens. You can't just like skip updrafts, that sort of thing.
Indeed.
I don't know. Complete side tangent.
Yeah, this is a crazy. I was. What are we even doing here? Yeah. We were kind of trying to talking about like if we would see something like this again, I guess, and I think that would be like a good place to wrap up. And then we talk about the balance. Okay.
There's no question they add something like this in again. There's no question. It's had such a positive response, and from a wide variety of people as well. Even people that will never do the content were like, wow, that was cool. I like, there's almost, this is going to be a weird thing to express, but there's sort of this gloom in the Guild Wars 2 community sometimes where people are almost embarrassed of their game. And, and I think there was a moment there where that was gone and people were really proud to be Guild Wars 2 players. And they were like, yeah, look at our game's potential. Look what we can do. Look at these top level players struggling against this stuff in my game. Like, look at how cool this is. Look at the attention we're getting. And I think there was this sort of community pride there for a moment. And I think that's really, really cool and really exciting. And it brought a lot of people together for a moment. The raiders like me, I like raids, and then there's the people that did story and stuff, or just do normal mode strikes every once in a while. We were all watching Hardstuck versus Snowcrows. Who's gonna get it first? Because they're neck and neck. And I don't know. I think that should definitely continue. Now, for me, I think it's not even really a discussion. At some point, they have to nerf it or tweak it or do something. Like, I love the checkpoint system idea, by the way. They have to do something that makes it slightly more accessible because it's not vertical progression. But otherwise, this was a slam dunk from a like marketing perspective. And the beautiful part is they didn't even try, right? Like they didn't even tweet about it. Look, if I had the Twitter that day, I would have been going to all of the hardcore raiders from every other game and been like, yeah, you can beat this, but I don't know if you can beat this in our game. I would have been super sassy about it and just tried to make it like a big event, but they didn't. I don't even think they tweeted about it or talked about it much. They just put it out there, and look at what organically happened. Imagine if they take this and now they run with it and put more emphasis on it and put a trailer out and get people excited and hyped about it. This could become way bigger, and that really excites me, as you can tell.
I don't think that they liked it happen this way. Like, overall, the studio, I feel like overall they don't like the hardcore scene. They don't want the hardcore scene in the game, and having hardcore WoW players and other stuff where they didn't have the ability to curate the audience, I think probably bothers them. I think that they want to be in control of the narrative and the perception, and since that kind of broke out, like, why would they acknowledge it? What did I miss?
I just saw Sneb say yeah in the chat. That's what you missed.
Congratulations on Master.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one, because obviously, we do want to see something like this again in the game, but it also needs to deliver value. And of course, all of the buzz around the game, like all the hype, I think that is really, really good stuff. But and it could be almost perceived as an investment. Right? Sure, one of these in the game might not be, maybe it's not that good, right? But if you actually slowly build up a catalog of events like this and a catalog of content like this, then I think that becomes a lot more interesting, right? And this is where the advantage of Guild Wars 2 having horizontal progression, I think really comes into play, right? Because if let's say we want to go and play World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy. Well, Final Fantasy handles this a little bit better because it can kind of scale you down a little bit for old content. But in World of Warcraft, if you want to play a raid from even a previous patch, it's going to get screwed over by vertical progression, right? Because even as you move through an expansion in World of Warcraft, you get ridiculously more powerful as time goes on. You have more health, more damage, more everything, right? But in Guild Wars 2, Harvest Temple Challenge Mode, it's just going to stay like that forever. It's just there forever at this point, which is very good, And when they add something else like that, then you've got two of them, and it's there forever, right? And when we're down the line, 3 years time. Well, actually, no. I was going. 3 years sounds like a long time, but realistically, best case scenario, you get something like this once a year. I think it's much more likely to be once an expansion, actually. So more like every 2 years, every 1.5 years, whatever the schedule's going to end up being.
Every 10 years.
Every 10 years. Something like that. But over time, it will build up, and I think that is actually really, really cool. And I think over time, you kind of get compound interest essentially on how much really hard content you have in the game, because the more of it there is, the more attractive it's going to be to that other audience in other games, right? And I think just having something aspirational is also good in the game too. For a lot of players who are getting into raids and getting into strikes, it's going to be that motivation to keep playing and keep practicing with your team and have a really robust team, because eventually you'll try and aim to take down like the really, really, really hard content at the top level there as well. Do you want to talk about balance?
I was just about to say, let's. There's a big elephant in the room, and let's just say it's not wearing an elementalist outfit.
Yeah. Oh man. So let's set the scene. Let's set the scene. A little bit after the release of End of Dragons, ArenaNet, they sowed the seed of excitement. They said there will be a major profession update on June 28th. And honestly, everyone was really excited about it. Everyone was incredibly excited because balance updates and profession design, it's been a sore spot, right? For Guild Wars 2, I would say, for a pretty long amount of time. Certainly through a lot of Path of Fire, and certainly going into End of Dragons as well. So people were naturally very excited for this. And I'll put it mildly, when the patch dropped, I think it was disappointing, not just in the fact that people didn't like the changes, but also in the scope of the changes as well. I think players were expecting large reworks. We were expecting to have some like a big shake-up to the meta, a lot of updates to different game modes, right? Addressing some long-standing issues like unique modifiers being quite oppressive sometimes, like banners or spirits, reducing diversity in play in terms of support roles and DPS roles, all this kind of stuff, right? Like there was very high expectations for this patch. And I think it will be fair to say the patch did not deliver on this, or rather, and more specifically, I think this is, this is something that Emmy was bringing up a little bit before we went live. Okay, we got to have the elite tea time. Is the fact that there were,
my thunder.
Yeah, I'm stealing it. This is mine now. I'm just, it's this is why you should just be mute right before tea time starts, right? It's GG, but look, credit where it's due. Okay, like the issue was that some of the design principles that ArenaNet were aiming for here did not actually happen, right? In fact, it made it worse in a lot of ways, particularly if you play Warrior.
A good thing they told us about the design, the thought behind the design, and their reasoning behind it all, and that thing they released the other day.
Yes.
Yep.
That
Kind of
helped
to
a lot too.
Yeah, kind of to expand on that a little bit more. I think it's very telling that when they released the blog post, when they've been kind of like hinting at this beforehand, like saying things on Reddit, people are actually overwhelmingly positive towards it. Like there were some people kind of like a bit worried, a bit like, about like class homogeneity, but most people are like, yeah, it would be really great if more new players could get into endgame content. It would be really great if more classes had access to buffs. So, Firebrand and Mechanist aren't so overpowered. Yeah, it would be really great if some of like the lesser used weapons got reworks. A lot of people actually really did agree with the idea, kind of like the design principles of it. But then the actual implementation felt very, for lack of a better word, half-assed, right? It felt like, they were kind of moving in that direction, but they were very scared to actually commit to it, right? It's like, I always bring up another game that I play, League of Legends. You guys have probably heard about it. But when they release like a new character, or when they like do some sort of really big rework, they really pump up the hype. And then when it comes out, everything is like super overpowered. It's super broken. And obviously there's like financial interest in theirs because they want to be able to sell like, this new character that came out. But at the same time, it works really well, I think, for the community, because then people are like, whoa, this is like so strong. I'm having a lot of fun with this. This is like really unique and all that kind of stuff. And then they kind of like slowly dial it back into like a more balanced state, like kind of almost in like small hidden fixes, right? Like I think for a lot of people, it's like the first impression really matters, right? It's like you play like, I don't know, Quickness Herald, and you're like, wow, I can keep up 100% quickness by pressing like one button and everything. And then slowly as the months kind of go on, like, the meta kind of settles. And if they were to nerf it back, it's like, oh, you have to like keep up 100 quickness by pressing 5 buttons. I think most people would kind of be like, whatever. People just forget about it, right? Because our attention span is quite small. And if they had released like another really big thing at the same time, they could have hidden like nerfed it. And then, yeah, some people might have been upset, but it wouldn't have been that bad. So it's like, I think a really big part of this is when it just didn't really feel like they delivered on like the idea of like, shaking up the meta. This feels like a very gentle, like, I don't know, swirl instead of like a massive shakeup. And then on top of that, I think a lot of like the changes didn't really target the people that they said they wanted to target. Like I remember there was one line when I read like the balance manifesto that I was like, taken in a vacuum, I actually 100% agree with this, where they want to lower the skill floor so more people can get into the combat or into the, this type of like stuff, but then not really touching the skill ceiling so that people can continue to have this sort of thing to like strive for. But I feel like a lot of the changes went the complete other way around, where it's like it only really affected people playing at a higher end, and then the newer players aren't really all that much better for it. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of like my take on it. And then another thing, just while I'm talking here and everything again, I'm a very firm believer that most development companies, because ArenaNet at the end of the day, they're doing like software development, right? Like they probably have some sort of metrics to kind of support the stuff that they're looking at. So they might be looking at some sort of data or some sort of like thing that they measured in the background, and they're thinking, okay, well, these certain classes might have like a really high win rate when they do certain like types of encounters. These classes might have lower win rate. These are more played by newer players, these are less played by newer players, that sort of thing. But I think what really showed in this balance patch is that it feels like they had the data, but they didn't analyze it correctly. It feels like they kind of only looked at the data in a vacuum without actually looking at kind of like how players would actually interact with that data, which I think in turn led to the stuff that we saw, where like in principle, the idea sounds really good, but it feels really bad to actually play with it as the players.
Then their solutions
Yeah.
were in a vacuum too, right? Like
Yeah.
the solutions are very much on paper, it kind of works, right? But it doesn't really.
Mhm.
I think you look. They have a very singular goal in mind when they're looking at this. Okay, we're going to give quickness to this build, and that means it's good, right? It must be good. It gives quickness. How bad can it be, right? But that isn't the full story. And anyone who plays PvE especially will tell you that this isn't the full story. There's a lot that goes into a support build other than just if you can give quickness or not. It's very much how you do that, right? How flexible you can be, what else you can bring to the table, right? Ultimately, is the build also fun to play? Does giving quickness and then moving your quickness, picking up your banner, does it remove all of your skills, right? Like there's a lot of factors that's going to go into play rate that's not just about does it work, right? It's a very robotic, very it ignores the human element, I think, is what's going on with a lot of the design decisions that ArenaNet have made here. It really falls flat, in my opinion, in the actual execution of their ideas. Because not only does it kind of, fail sometimes, right? If you look at the builds that have been created, they aren't good, except for Herald. That one actually is pretty good now. And Druid, I guess, is pretty good. But, you know, a lot of the other design decisions they've made, right, haven't really paid off, in my opinion. There's a lot of asymmetry, like, in the game right now. Like, why is it that if you want to give quickness on Warrior, you need to have, like, quite a lot of boon duration, right? Like, particularly if you want to, you know, if you want to use the banners. But if you're going to play something like Firebrand, not really so much. Why do you need so much boon duration on Herald? Compared to other options there as well. Like, why is it like this? Why can this class do all of this with only one utility skill or one button, but you need to use 5 buttons to do something else, making you way less flexible, right? Talking about this stuff in a vacuum and the way they designed it is partially one of the reasons why it hasn't really worked out very well for them, to be honest.
Well, I think that is a fair explanation for some of the stuff. But for specifically like Warrior, I don't think it's even justifiable to like say they just looked at the data wrong or they just made the solution in a vacuum. With Warrior in particular, it feels like they just tried to play a prank or quite honestly communicate that Warrior mains aren't welcome in the game.
Wow.
And in raid groups and in content. And I'm not trying to be a cynical, toxic asshole when I say that, but looking at the changes and seeing the changes and logging into all of that, like watching how banners work and how quickness work, it feels like it just feels like they said, hey, maybe we should just see, let's do an experiment. Let's see how the game works if Warrior's not in it anymore. This could be really interesting. Let's see how the game works if it's only Mechanists and Firebrands. And like with Catalyst too, it's with Warriors, it just almost feels malicious. But with Catalyst and Elementalist, it's almost like they went and it's like they took a math test and they just put like answers from a history test on the questions because they didn't study and they're just used to like cheating and they don't like it just doesn't make sense. It's just like what were you doing? Like why did you nerf this? Meta defining and like all this shit. But it's just
Yeah, I very easy to take those changes personally because I think just compare if everything was collectively at the same level of bad, I think most people would agree, yeah, it's probably just like a disconnect. But I do agree. I think with Elementalist and Warrior in particular, it felt like it was very just ignorant in a way. Like I remember hearing someone say like kind of like a pseudo justification for like the crit chance in arms is because historically, if you look at that trait line, there is a lot of crit chance, but like practically speaking, it's very different than like what Teapot said is like it's very different than on paper, right? It's like just because this is where a lot of crit is does not mean that functionally this is where people go to for crit chance. And then I remember thinking it was very strange because I feel like a lot of the changes that they re-implemented with like some of the classes used to be how the classes were in the first place, and they decided that wasn't good. So example is Warrior, you needing to actually pick up the banners. It's like doing a freaking fetch quest in the middle of like Doom CM or something like that. Or like, you know, like Chronomancer used to be able to give alacrity on every single well, but then they removed that because they thought that that was problematic. So it feels like it definitely is this, right? Like the balance team from 6 years ago is very different from the balance team right now, and they very clearly have different ideas of like, you know, this is good for the game. So it's like I just find it really interesting that we've in a way we've almost reverted back like 6 years in terms of gameplay. So.
I would actually argue that like 6 years ago, see, this is how it feels to me as someone who's been around for a long time and has been mad at balance basically since the very beginning. I would have argued, and like I used to argue, that there is no balanced team. That it's just people that come together at the end of the month before the patch comes out, and they just look at stuff really fast and they just push changes through. But now, it feels like there's actually a balanced team, and that the balanced team has done stuff to like buff things that they like playing and troll things that they don't. Like it feels like there's an actively almost like malicious hand involved now, whereas previously in like all the other X-Packs and Path of Fire, in Heart of Thorns, like in the base game, it just felt like it just random people. They would go around and survey people in their cubicles and their computers, like, what do you think's balanced? Okay, cool, we'll push this through. Okay, we won't change this. Maybe we look at Snowcrows. But now it feels like there is agency, and like there's this like collective in the shadows, like doing something, and it's just hateful, and they're just like,
Nah, that's the way it feels.
No. This was the balanced team before, right?
Yeah.
Now that's the balanced team. Now, where are you, Warriors? We're gonna get you. That's a Guild Wars 2 balance right there. I've lost my chair too. I'm trying to get it back, but fucking Jesus Christ.
So I mean, so yeah, there is definitely an element. I can definitely understand how it can feel that way. However, listen, okay, and now this might even be more brutal. Okay, let us not attribute malice to what can easily be explained by incompetence.
Agreed.
Let's be honest here. Like at the end of the day, I just think they kind of fucked it up horribly. To put it simply, realistically, it hasn't worked. And I think they misdiagnosed a lot of issues, and their execution on fixing the problems was bad. I think what Emmy said really sums it up, and I think is an excellent an excellent lens to view this. Everyone loved the notes, or rather like what they said they wanted to do. Everyone was like super hyped, right? When it increased diversity, everyone was hyped about Ranger getting Alacrity and Warrior giving quickness. Everyone was hyped up about that. That was like universally praised, actually. And, like looking at banners, looking at spirits, right? Oh, this is going to make all the other healers better, right? That's so exciting. That's so cool, right? But it was actually the execution of that was just basically a complete failure, right? And yeah, on the misdiagnosis stuff as well, just want to kind of just slip this in here as well. Like ArenaNet's kind of crusade against unique modifiers. I think this really it's very telling to me, like where they're having problems, because they removed Signet Share as well. And that's super interesting. Why did they do that? Well, they want to get rid of unique modifiers. But in my opinion, this is a misdiagnosis of why unique modifiers are bad. Banners and spirits were problematic because they were permanent all the time, right? And passive with no downside, right? Like something like that ends up being very oppressive in your metagame, right? Because like, well, if you're not taking that, you're kind of trolling, right? Why would you not take like just a free, insane, overpowered stat buff to your entire squad? And you also package it in with a really strong support build at the same time for no downside, right? Because you would take spirits anyway, and it's not like you're giving anything up really to take these abilities. You just get them for free, right? There's no reason. Same with banners on Warrior, right? You just take banners because they're really good. The thing is about the thing with Signet Share and other stuff like that, it's like, well, it wasn't mandatory, right? There was kind of a downside. It was a skillful thing to use, right? It wasn't oppressive, right? You didn't have people saying like, right, we will only play with exactly 2 Radiance Firebrands sharing signets. It didn't happen, right? And it wouldn't happen. And that's because of the nature of Signature. You'd see it pop up a lot in fractals because Firebrand was really strong, and you might as well run it there, I guess. But ultimately, I don't think it was very oppressive. And this is the kind of thing I get here. Like it almost feels like ArenaNet didn't get it, right? They didn't quite understand why some of these things were problematic. And you might say, well, Teapot, that's a really condescending and unfair thing to say. Well, I would actually agree with that, but they haven't given me the confidence that they actually understand the issues with the notes they released. And this is kind of like the compound issue, right? They almost refused to acknowledge any of the questionable design decisions they made. They didn't explain any of the questionable stuff they did in the notes. And as a result of that, everyone's very upset with them, and nobody has confidence in the team, right? Because a lot of the things that people were upset with were totally ignored and were not addressed in any way. And also the language choice is very poor, like meta-defining. Very poor choice of words there by ArenaNet.
I have a bit of a comment on that.
Okay.
I think for me, I wonder if other people feel the same. Is really what I'm going for here. for me, because they didn't address those things, it makes me feel like they kind of know it's a mistake and are afraid of admitting it.
All right.
And
Yes.
and so that honestly just makes it worse. It just makes it so much worse. I would much rather they say, yeah, we really messed up. This is how we're going to fix it.
Okay.
And I think they sort of tacitly, or well, not tacitly, they directly did that. They said that they were going to balance things, and Grouch explained the timeline and whatever. But because they didn't address it directly in those notes, it felt really weird. Felt like they didn't want to talk about it. Maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe there's a deeper reason, but it made me slightly uncomfortable because I just thought there's no justification for this. But maybe that's coming. Maybe there is justification. They just haven't released it yet. But for some reason, I thought that they would say, hey, Warriors were blah, 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 blah. This is why we chose to do blah, 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 blah.
Maybe
But
to
they
play
didn't say
devil's
anything like that.
I think my honest read on this thing with like the notes and the like design like notes or whatever the thing was that released on Friday was called, it feels like that whenever the initial shit show happened, that someone told Grouch, hey, look, we have notes explaining all of this, like we have reasoning behind it, and Grouch said, awesome, we're going to give that to the community. That's going to show even more transparency, and we're going to regain some goodwill. And then Grouch said, hey, can I see those notes? And it was almost like someone's bluff got called, and they're just like, oh, fuck. And then Grouch is like, yeah, let me see those notes. And he looks at it, and he's just like, oh, shit. And so then they're in this spot. It is an unwinnable position to be in, where you have committed to releasing design notes that justify why you made such stupid changes to Warrior, when everyone knows there's no conceivable reality in which these changes were actually good. That parallel universe doesn't exist. That anime timeline split doesn't exist. The changes were bad no matter how you cut it. And so now Grouch is just like, well, fuck. We can't make anything up. Like, and I say Grouch, I don't know. I'm just using it. But it felt like people were just like, yeah, we'll do this. Yeah, we'll regain the goodwill. Okay, now we got it. And then it's time to put it out. Oh, but this is fucking horrible. But we've already committed to say that, we're going to do this. So now what do we do? They wait until like 5 on a Friday. They post it on the forums so they can go home, see the backlash over the weekend because the backlash was inevitable, and then like make a tweet or another update on Reddit on Monday or something. And like, I guess that's the approach that they thought they would take to win, to where they can say, hey, you're right, we shouldn't have posted on a Friday. Hey, we dropped the ball, blah, blah, blah. And they just try to like take the weekend to just not think about the reaction, or maybe like dip their toes into Reddit to see how bad it was. And then they're going to try to play cleanup on like Monday or Tuesday.
I don't know.
That's how
I
it
think
feels like it came off. Sorry, go ahead, Emmy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it definitely feels that way, but it's kind of like Teapot said earlier. I don't think this is like malicious in nature. It's like I think the patch notes felt really bad, and it's really easy to see this as like, oh, they're trying to like hide, like, that they didn't know what they were doing, or they wanted to like not admit to it or something like that. The reality is they probably did realize that there wasn't a very good justification for it. So instead of trying to highlight it and be like, yeah, we messed up on this, they kind of had a bit more of a forward-looking thing, right? Because they've already announced that they are planning on hot fixing some things. They did want to like increase transparency. Grouch has been like going through like, Reddit threads and like Twitch chats and everything, saying like, we're not going to let up on this. We're going to definitely make sure that like, we make right on this wrong, like that sort of thing. And I think maybe this is a bit too PMA, maybe a little bit too hopium, but I think that's a good thing, because like dwelling on the negativity, even if it does give us like this very brief sense of satisfaction, like, ha, we got you, like, ain't it, you were wrong. Like, does that really help? I don't think that really helps. It's like I think I think
I'm very inclined to agree with this type of sentiment from yourself and Preston as well here, and especially what Preston said actually regarding like it doesn't matter what they say, right? They're in a lose-lose.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that it looks like the strategy they're going to go for here, and I think I'd actually be inclined to agree with this strategy, like reflecting on it. They're just going to try and unfuck it, right? Like that's what they're going to do. They know that if they say we fucked up, it makes them look weak and incompetent, basically, which obviously that's not good. If they ignore it, then people are going to be angry anyway. Like, I don't think it doesn't even matter. There is absolutely nothing they could say that would be better, that would make it better. I don't think. I just don't see it. Really?
Actually. Yeah.
Really? What do you think they should have done?
Well, so what we're talking about here is restitution. We're talking about them trying to fix their reputation or minimize the damage. The way that they're going to do that in this case is probably to just admit they messed up and be human. They need to humanize themselves. If they're human and they say, you know what, and because they did this already, by the way, they said, Grouch said somewhere, we're committed to making this right. Like they kind of tacitly said that they made a mistake. I think they just to come out and be like, yo, we kind of screwed up with those notes now, because I think we should have done this. And so here it is. They need to just admit that they made a mistake and then not dwell on it, but just say, okay, here's how we're going to fix it.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, they might be figuring that out though, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and they very well might be.
Yeah. I think in a way, I'm of the opinion, I think they've already humanized themselves quite a bit, right? And to be fair, when they said they were releasing the Balance Manifesto, they weren't saying they were going to release that in response to the community. They just wanted to put on the table their justification for it, which you could kind of take as like, since there was no justification for Warrior, therefore it is unjustifiable sort of thing. But I don't remember getting the impression that they were releasing this blog post in response to how people took the changes. They just wanted to lay on the table, this is what we thought, and I think
they were though, weren't they? Because they said that they had initially made it. And you're right, by the way, they have been humanizing themselves a lot more. And I think it's paying dividends. They went and said, what was it? He said something like, we made an active choice not to include it this time, and clearly that was the wrong choice. So moving forward, we're always going to include this, and we're going to make these notes happen next week.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that's very different though, right? It's like they're going to include the notes on their justification. They're not going to say like, okay, in response to Joe Bob saying these things about like Warrior, this is the reason why we did that, in counter to their point. You know what I'm saying? It's like they're just laying on the table what they were thinking at the time. And if they weren't thinking on the time, then obviously they have nothing to lay on the table there. Which is why I feel like this is kind of, in a way, almost like a straw man, right? Like we're kind of beating up ArenaNet on like, oh, they didn't explain the things we wanted them to think about, without really focusing on like what we want them to now change moving forward. And I think that's where the really important conversation is, So it's like, if they've already said they're committed to making this right, then us railing on them for not saying the specific words that we wanted to hear is not going to make sure that they like get the changes correct. Like,
well, yes and no. I don't think that anyone deserves to be attacked or anything like that. But I think that lots of this criticism is actually really healthy and correct. It comes off as a lack of pulse on the community and a lack of understanding what needs to be said, because people had very direct questions and were very vocal about these literally everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, all social media, the forums, Reddit, and to not address them and it just is perceived, and perception is the only thing that matters here. It's perceived as they don't understand or aren't listening.
Well, no, but that's actually what the reality of it is, though. And sorry, I can't let this one go, Sneb. But when you said like
debate,
looking human and apologizing is the right thing to do, like how many fucking times can you employ that strategy before people are just like, oh yeah, this company is just gonna like, we're sorry, oops, sorry.
Yeah, that's the problem. They've put themselves in a really big hole, because every time you do that, it becomes astronomically more difficult to make amends, and you have to go further and further and further, and frankly at some point it doesn't work anymore. So it's pretty important for them to do and say the things that need to be said and do it quickly, because time is also a very important variable when it comes to things like this, because the longer people sit on a mistake, the more angry they get.
I agree with that, which is I really don't like that they release the patch notes on a Friday. Even
Yeah,
my
it's
own manager is
actual
always
science,
like,
by the way.
never
Unwatched.
release anything to prod on a Friday unless you're willing to work the weekend for it. So I think
Here's a fire take. This is
Okay.
like the rays of the sun destroying the ozone, burning the world in an apocalypse take.
Ooh.
You ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
They should have just not pushed the patch through.
Okay, I don't think so. I'm speaking as a developer myself. I've done region launches. If you try to untangle that code, it is not a fun time. They would have
should've
had
just
to
held the whole
really
patch.
delay everything.
Yeah,
I know.
I don't think they should
I
have
don't
done
think
that.
They should have delayed. They should have delayed the whole thing because it's that bad. It's gonna over. Because see now, guess what? Now guess what? We had Harvest Temple CM race to worlds first, and Teapots on Max's show talking about everything, and you have people are like, "Ooh, Guild Wars 2. This game looks fun. I play League of Legends, and it's an unbalanced shit show. I want to try a new MMO." And they come over, and the entire subreddit is flaming ArenaNet about the balance patch, and it's medieval fan art roleplay. That's the entire subreddit. Like, do you think that was actually good, or would it have been better for people to have come over from hearing about Harvest Temple CM and like seeing like, this is great, oh my gosh, this is the best balance patch in the history of time, guys, I can finally play Elementalist in a group for the first time since 2012 when the Lightning Hammer was meta with staff. Holy shit, guys, oh my god, ArenaNet is the best company of all time forever, and this is the best the game's ever been. But we get this, which is like half of it is really good, half of it is terrible, and we just have the same cycle of people come look at the game and they're just like, well, fuck, I'll play free. I'll play free to play for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
I'll experience Corteria. Oh, okay, well, there's always Skyrim to reinstall. The Last of Us is getting re-released for the third time. Maybe I'll just go play that instead.
I could see,
And that's what's gonna happen.
It's worth talking about. I do think there was actually quite an amusing battle, right? So the balance notes dropped, and everyone was like, "This is the worst video game ever made, and the worst company to exist in America," right? You know, I prefer EA to ArenaNet. Actually, well, no. Okay, I mean, no one would go that far. Okay, no one's sane anyway. And then Harvest Temple CM dropped, and it was like, holy shit, this is amazing. ArenaNet is actually really cool. Like it was like the balance team was having a mini 1v1 with like the skills team, with like the content team, right? Like who's gonna win? Who's gonna shift the opinion of the game more, right? Will it be Harvest Temple CM or will it be balance, right? And then it kind of evened out a little bit, and they kind of cancel each other out almost. But then, oh god, the balance notes dropped, and the skills team, they landed a crushing blow, destroying Cameron's hope, right, of like restoring the image of the game, annihilating the community morale, right, in a single crushing attack. And I think that the really important part there, yeah, so I think Brazil is right here. It kind of sucks that these things happen at the same time. I do think that it stole the thunder a bit, right, of Harvest Temple CM. It was very much overshadowed by the balance. There's no question about that, in my opinion. However, I do think that what Sneb said was also really important here about this. And actually, I think it's worth exploring a bit more, particularly with some comments that were made about Elementalist. I think what really upset people about the notes is that they were very out of touch, right, with basically the way people talk about the game, and the experience of the players was not very well represented by essentially a lot of the changes and the way the changes were being discussed. I think the really big one, might as well talk about it. The really big meme line, one of the funniest things I read actually that did entertain me, was that it was said that that Catalyst was meta defining in raids. And this is a really interesting statement, and it gives you a huge amount of insight into the way ArenaNet looks at things. Because that statement is true, actually. As time would progress, you probably would see almost every record broken by abusing a catalyst stack. That's probably true. That would have slowly started to happen, right? But the issue is that the situation that would allow that to happen is totally disconnected from the normal player experience, right? And it's also nothing to do with the concerns of the players as well. Is Catalyst bad? Actually, no. If you play Catalyst in a pug group well, you'll probably be top DPS. You can watch Mela do this on stream very frequently. It's actually not a bad build whatsoever. The issue is that ArenaNet, they didn't just nerf the problematic design of Catalyst, right? They were like, yeah, Catalyst is meta-defining, so we're going to nerf the damage of every Catalyst build that exists, and we're also going to nerf the quickness Catalyst build in a dog shit way by just giving it a 10% damage reduction when you take the fucking trait. Oh, God. What I don't like is, how did they not predict how people would react to that? How did they not know? Like, why would they write that? Why would you type that out on your keyboard and tell people, right, that their 1% play rate class is meta-defining for normal players? Why would you type those words? It is just insane, right?
It's a huge oversight. Huge oversight. And in my opinion, it really just furthers that gap between player and developer. Because right now, I think you can summarize the way that the community feels by saying they feel like no one's listening and they feel very misunderstood. Because it just comes off that way when those sorts of things slide in. Because what they meant, and I actually agree with this, what they meant is that at the top 0.01%, Catalyst is extremely powerful, 20% more so than other classes, because if you play this literally perfectly in a very isolated way with other very, very good players, this is the absolute best option by a mile. That's what they meant. But when you say meta-defining, meta means different things to everybody. Namely, when I saw that, my initial reaction was, what do you mean? There are no elementalists anywhere, because I interpreted that as the pug meta, the normal raider meta. And currently the normal raider meta is, how many mechanists can we put in the group? Or how many firebrands are available currently? Or do we have all of these? I don't know. It's become a little bit silly. The number of times I even saw a catalyst, by the way, was maybe once every 20 or 30 groups, maybe. That's what it felt like. Almost never. And generally, they performed about the same unless they were in the hands of a very good player, which was usually the only time I saw them anyway. So when I read that, I went, what are you talking about? No one played that. It was so hard to play. It was like not safe. It didn't provide that much utility. Like even I went to play Catalyst and I thought, you know what? I'm okay at this, but it's just safer to play this other thing. So it came off as so out of touch. It was hard to even fathom. But it's not what they meant. And I think that's the sad part, is because I know they didn't mean it like that, but that's just how it can be perceived and interpreted.
Well,
are you sure?
I think that's actually a little too charitable, right? And I do like to give a lot. I like to be very charitable, but I think that's actually a little bit too far. I think they did mean that. The reason why people are upset with it is because it ignores the concerns of the players. If you break down that statement, everyone would agree with it. Yes, Catalyst was pretty poorly designed and was causing some serious issues at high level play. Right? I think that's exactly what they meant, and that's exactly what they said. The word choice was very poor with meta-defining. I do agree, and that is where the wording gets a little bit muddy. But I think what people are upset with is that there are a lot of words that are conspicuously absent in that paragraph about Elementalist, right? If we want to kind of like make the game easier to play, right, to increase the floor of effectiveness, to kind of lower the skill floor, right, then why did we nerf every single Catalyst build? Why didn't we buff some of the auto attacks or some of the second skills to make it easier to play, to get more value out of? Why didn't we give it some more tankiness or some more support components? Why didn't we do that? Why did we the only changes we made to Catalyst were aimed at the top 0.1%? Why? Right? Like, and that kind of lack of wording is, I think, what's ultimately caused people to become very upset, in my opinion. So that's why I'd be slightly less charitable regarding that particular set of changes, because it's not so much what was said that upset people, it's what wasn't said that upset people.
Yeah, and it
combined
just
with
comes off as out of touch.
Yeah, and it comes out as extremely out of touch. Yeah, like very out of touch.
I just, it's hard for me to understand. The Guild Wars 2 community is very, very passionate. They care a lot about the game. They do. And so it's weird because it feels like the player-dev relationship is just very odd. Like, it's like they don't really want to talk to us sometimes. But players have some pretty good feedback. And if given the opportunity, could present it in a way that's more palatable than just raging out on Reddit. Because there are some really good posts on Reddit giving data, big explanations. And it just surprises me sometimes that ArenaNet wouldn't take the notes that they wrote and stress test them against like a group of people. I mean, maybe they do this and I don't know. If they do, then I'm really surprised some of this stuff was missed. Because if they had sent me those notes and they had said, Sneb, what do you think about this? I would have said, oh boy, you probably shouldn't use that word because people will interpret that very differently. And you probably should include this, this, and this. And you neglected to mention this, this, and this. And if you don't mention them, you better have a good reason. And I feel like a lot of members of the community could do that. So it's just very odd because they could prevent a lot of this stuff from happening by stress testing it with the community.
I also just kind of want to chime in here to point out that once again, we're kind of going back to the whole idea of like these balanced patch notes were meant to enable newer players, right? Like make this sort of stuff more accessible. But the only people that are really talking about it are the higher end of players, right? Like only like people who are like really understand like the fundamentals of the game, how all of these systems work together, like how certain builds play in like certain ways. Only they're really talking about this because only they really understand, right? Like for most of like, newer players that are first getting into fractals, first getting into raids, first getting into strike missions are likely not really going to, in all honesty, they probably won't really feel a difference, right? Like Catalyst doing less damage, if they're not playing on a proper build, they probably weren't doing that much damage in the first place. So that's for me, that's kind of like the biggest issue that I have with the patch, is less so with individual classes and how those individual classes are performing, but more of like, it feels like they kind of took this whatever data they might have in the background and then kind of just like turned it on its head. So maybe slight derail, but this is how I personally see it. Is I was actually looking at the fractal change because I'm more familiar with fractals than these individual classes and stuff. But I think it's along the same vein, where basically they had this idea that like players, they even said it in the patch notes. They were saying like in fractals we've noticed there's a really big bottleneck where like people are dying a lot, so therefore we need to increase survivability, right? In theory, that idea makes sense, right? It's like new players are dying, therefore we give them survivability. But they don't really address all of the other stuff that actually makes sense. Like if that's the case, then why not buff the fractal defensive pop? Or why not make classes individually themselves have more tools for self-survivability? Why do these other things that don't really make all that much sense? And I think that's kind of like the same issue that we're seeing with a lot of these individual like classes and stuff, where we say like, oh, these classes, like, they're overperforming in some ways, they're underperforming in others. So let's just take a big hammer to it all and then not really address those individual problems. So,
yeah, that's an interesting point to raise, because I would actually strongly argue that most players, like the catalyst trait that says you do 10% less damage if you take this trait or whatever, most players don't know because they don't read the traits, and they also don't even know what they have equipped. in terms of traits, gear, stats, runes. They have no idea. They just walk around and they just hit stuff. And the Centaur normal mob in Harathi Hinterlands CC'd me and ran over me, but it just knocked me down for a few seconds, and then I auto attacked it 8 times and it died anyways. Guess I'm good to keep going and playing the game. Seems fine to me. And it's that's its own thing, I guess, that I probably don't need to derail into. But yeah, and also people don't know just how accurate and widespread that is, because there's not really a way of knowing what gear people are using and what traits they're using and all this shit. But for a lot of people, I would actually argue for most people, they will be completely unaffected. But the people that are like the people that are going to be unaffected, like they're never going to do Harvest Temples. They're just going to, like, whenever the wind blows a different direction, they're just going to go play it. I don't know. I don't know if I should open this door.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little bit conflicted on this, because on one hand, yeah, honestly, a lot of this, because this might surprise people, but the balance stuff doesn't bother me at all. I don't really care that much at all, because I can still play the game and be fine. Like, if you nerf Mechanist into oblivion, I'm gonna be okay. I'll find a different way to beat the content. So when I look at the balance stuff, I actually don't really get that worked up about it. What bothers me more is just that feeling of like, I don't really understand why you're doing this. Like, I don't get it. And then when it comes to the new players, I feel like it actually does affect them, but just not in a very direct way. People that aren't interested in endgame content, it doesn't affect them at all, really. If you're playing open world, none of these changes matter enough to make it so that you can't play your class or whatever. I think the way that it does affect people is really just a sentiment about what they're playing. And then if they do try to get into Fractals and they're playing Catalyst, people are going to say, why are you playing Catalyst all the time to them? And as they get higher up in the tiers of Fractals and start trying to do these other CMs and stuff, people will start to question their choice more and more and gatekeep them out of this content purely because of the profession they're playing. So only at some point does it really start affecting them. But I think generally in the community, as things have a negative sentiment, it trickles down and does affect people more and more and more. And then as they progress, it hurts them more and more and more.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. I think another really big thing to point out here is that it feels like these changes are very permanent, because historically they have been, right? It's like we get one balance patch every like 6 months or something like that. Whereas like
Yeah.
other games, like, if they had more frequent balance patches, you can kind of rotate classes in and out. Like you can make one class like just blatantly OP, but people are okay with it because they know that it's going to get nerfed in like the next like month or so. So it's like I feel like that is also a really big problem in Guild Wars 2. And I feel like it's probably the reason why some of these changes felt very half-hearted, is because ArenaNet didn't want to put something super overpowered in the game that they weren't going to touch for another 6 months. So in their eyes, I guess like the better alternative is to have a bunch of things that feel kind of lackluster, and then they can kind of slowly tune up in the next couple of balance patches, so they're not like game breaking. But then I don't know. I think it's healthier to like have honestly a constantly changing meta, so at least like your class or your playstyle might kind of get like rotated in to be like more desired than others, and then it just makes things more interesting that way. But I think unless they dedicate more resources and more time and energy and money into like a balanced team that can feasibly do that, I don't think that's gonna ever really be implemented. So
Yeah, going along with what you said, I think people don't believe them.
yeah,
If they say, yeah, we're going to balance more, I think people just don't believe them.
yeah, I agree.
I mean, I've mentioned this before. When they talk about alliances, I just think, all right, when it comes out, that's when I'll pay attention to this. Because I remember sitting in my orientation for graduate school.
Oh no.
Yeah, I was sitting in my orientation for graduate school, sitting in the back with my laptop open on Twitch, watching the Guild Wars 2 channel, watching the Icebrood Saga announcement.
Oh no.
And I recall,
Oh no.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
no.
recall when they talked about alliances, and I was like, yeah. Now when they talk about alliances, even though they have good intentions and everything, I just don't want to engage with it because I don't completely trust that it's gonna happen. Even though I really like Grouch and I think he's doing a really good job, I have trust issues now, okay? Like I don't 100% believe it. So I think people feel the same way when they talk about things like the cadence of updates or balance. People are like, oh, well, kind of this happened a couple years ago, and you might have said that
Yeah.
before, but it didn't really happen the way that you said it, so I don't know if I can really trust it. And I think that's what happens. And the way that you fix that is but through action. You can say whatever you want. Words mean nothing at this point. It is absolutely doing exactly what you said you were going to do and executing well. That's the only way that you can come back from sort of these errors in my mind.
Yeah. To their credit, I do feel like they have been saying things and then following up on them. Like that they did say that they were going to release the strike CMs, and those were released for the most part, other than the Harvest Temple, on time. And they said that they were
Yeah.
going to increase the rewards for the strike missions and also open world. And then
Yes.
they did put in like rewards and stuff. And then they were talking about like we're prepping for the Steam sale by doing like A/B testing for newer players, and they have been doing that. So to their credit, I feel like they are trying to rebuild that trustworthiness. But I find it such a shame because I feel like this balance pass kind of just threw all that into the trash.
Yeah, because anytime they make a mistake now, people are very sensitive to it. Very sensitive. Because I absolutely agree. I think that there's a lot of stuff that they're doing and have done in the last even 6 months that have been extremely positive, and they did exactly what they said they were going to do. The problem is that historically, there has been a lot of wrong, and people look at that and really hold that against them, which I think sucks and in some ways is maybe kind of unfair. But at the same time, that's just the reality. So any mistake now is put under an absolute microscope. And so it's really important to be as consistent as possible. Mistakes are going to happen, and when they do happen, they should be addressed quickly, efficiently, and correctly.
Not after a Friday and a weekend.
Yeah, if you release something on it, and perception is all that matters here. If you release those notes on a Friday, which at 5 p.m., which is effectively what was done, it makes it look like it was at the last minute or done that day, even if it wasn't, because I'm sure they were working on that for a while. But when you release it at that time, people are like, ooh, I actually didn't think they were going to release it. I was pretty confident they weren't. It seemed, and I don't know if I would have even said that it was coming that week. Because it's such a risk. Because if anything happens, you can't release them, then it's another thing that people are going to hold against you. So it's so tricky with how you manage these things. You have to be so careful. For us, I'm sure it's very difficult to be in their position.
I think people are particularly sensitive to balance, though. I think if this was something else, because I mean, look, here's a great example. There was a post about alliances recently, right? And my interpretation of it is that it essentially implied that alliances aren't coming this year. It's going to be 2023, right? Because they said that, basically said, we're not even close, right? Is to summarize where they said they were with alliances. People weren't really upset by that. They were like, whatever. Okay, it's kind of expected. I think the problem with balance is that, one, people's expectations are very high. But secondly, I think this has been a sore point in the game historically for a long time. It's very much perceived that there's a lot of balance issues with the game, right? And the ArenaNet consistently makes mistakes when trying to address them. And sometimes even kind of makes changes that don't really make any sense, right? They're nonsensical to an extent. So I think people are super primed to be really upset because, one, I think it's very important. I think balance, or if you're even remotely invested in the game, right, balance is pretty important to you, right? Like, sure, if you're a lot of players, it's irrelevant. If you're just playing open world, it doesn't matter, right? But when you step into PvP or into raids or into strikes or world versus world, then balance is very, very important, right? It's extremely important that skills and things are well designed and it's fun to play. So I think that definitely contributes to like why this particular issue gets people very, very angry. Because yeah, and that's a good point too. People are very personally invested, right? Like, dude, I'm an Ellie main, right? I'm a necromancer main, warrior main. You know, look. In fact, this is look. Slight massive aside here, but this is a great test on who the warrior mains really are. Because if you look at the stats, warrior went from like 7.6% play rate down to 1.6%. That means that 5% of those warriors were fake warrior mains, right? The real warrior mains are the 1.6% left over. They'll keep playing even though their class got eviscerated in the balance patch. Doesn't matter. They're still grinding out warrior. They're going big. And all the other warriors, they betrayed it, went to mech. They all started playing mech afterwards. Traitors, I tell you.
Or they just went to another game. I don't know. It's I guess that's relative to the other classes though.
Yeah.
But man, this is okay. I have a question, Sneb. I have a question.
Ooh.
When Grouch said, honestly, alliances haven't been worked on since shortly after they were announced. That was painful. But do you think that was more or less painful than not understanding the logic behind, like, the warrior changes?
More or less painful than the warrior changes.
Yeah.
I just think they're very different. I'm not sure how I would interpret that. To me, when Grouch said that, it was an absolute necessity, because the problem is that nobody thinks alliances are ever coming out, because they were announced 4 years ago and then they were re-announced again and then nothing happened. And now they announced it again. And so when he announced it again, the issue was people have been like, you've been working on this for 4 years, buddy. Like, what do you mean? Right. And so he had to basically say, actually, they really haven't, because if otherwise it makes it look massively incompetent. Right.
Yeah.
You've been working on this for 4 years and you haven't released it. They actually haven't been working on it for 4 years. And that was very important to say. It was extremely painful. In fact, when it was said, I really respected that he said it, but it was hard to hear. It really was, because it's a huge trust breaker. You know, it's like, yeah, we led you along. We led you on for years. That's kind of how it felt, even though maybe that sounds harsh or dramatic or whatever, but it kind of feels that way if you're a world versus world player, right? You're like, you kept telling me this thing was happening. Like, we assumed you were working on this whole time. Why didn't you just tell us? The problem is that telling everybody would have been even worse in some ways at the time, right? Like, if you announced it and then months later, which is what happened, you stopped developing it, that would have been really bad. I think it might have been the more honest thing to do, but actually, I'm not sure that would have been taken very well. I think a lot of people would have quit the game, and that's what they were afraid of. But now was the right time to say that, given the change of leadership, change of direction, and they are working on it now. They had to say it. They had to. Otherwise, it made no sense, because it seemed like they were so early into the development of it, even though it had been developed for 4 years.
Okay.
I'm not sure that answers your question very well. When it comes to the warrior stuff, it hasn't been as long, right? Time is a big variable in apologies and restitution and those sorts of things. So I would argue that it's currently not as open of a wound. Well, no, that's not true. It's a fresh wound. We'll say that. It's a fresh wound. So it might hurt right now, but I think that they can sew that sucker up and fix it relatively easily right now, because there hasn't been a huge length of time that's surpassed. So I think in aggregate, the alliances are more painful.
Okay.
Yeah, I think something very similar happened when it was revealed that during the layoffs, right, when basically ArenaNet revealed that they kind of had Guild Wars 2 almost on the back burner a little bit while they were working on their other projects. I think that really shook players' confidence in the game a lot, actually. And I think, everyone here is absolutely right in saying that ArenaNet is in a difficult position. I feel like that this every time they have some trouble, we're like, oh yeah, it is in a very difficult position here, right? But you have to bring in the historical context, right? In a way, the age of Guild Wars 2 and the history of Guild Wars 2 is really biting it in the ass right now, and it's making, again, not to mention specific individuals like overly much, but it's making Grouch's job extremely difficult, right? Because he doesn't just have to make a good expansion and make the game good now. He needs to account for all of the mistrust, all of the saltiness, all of the disappointment of the past 5 years, right? And that is just, oh god, it ain't easy.
Hiring a community manager for that. And I'm not saying oh they should, but imagine that you're applying, you have some community management experience. You're gonna go in here. This would be horrible. This would be so hard to do from a community management perspective. You would need somebody that's already really well liked in the community, so that they don't get absolutely destroyed. Because people, if you didn't understand the game and if you didn't understand the history and everything, and you were walking into this, you'd have a really hard time, right? Good cat right there. I like it.
Well, okay. Let me try and maybe squeeze something out of this that's a little interesting to talk about, actually. Before we wrap things up here, before we completely derail into utter insanity, there is something that I do want to complain about, actually, and it happened in this stream as well. Poor Emmy was destroyed by the chat, called out for being an ArenaNet shill. This is something that I do actually really dislike about the way a lot of discourse happens. And it's why I really hope that in the future, ArenaNet are able to kind of get this under control a little bit and get some big wins in, some big W's. It's really difficult to say anything positive about the game sometimes because people are so frustrated with the way things are, is that if you say anything good or try and do anything good for the game, people will call you a shill. I realize this is a very niche problem. It applies to only content creators, which is not exactly a large demographic of people in Guild Wars 2. But you know what? This is my show. I can complain about what I want. And I'm complaining about it.
I actually think it goes both ways, though. I think if you say anything negative, everyone thinks that you're this evil, satanic person that it just only wants to bash the game. And then if you say anything positive, they swing way the other way, and you're you're just a shill. So it really doesn't matter what you say. There will be, random vitriol for no reason.
No.
Because I get that a lot, actually. People say, because I'm very critical, but I also present solutions. I don't like to game bash. I think that's very different. When you just say, "Oh yeah, the game sucks," come on, the game doesn't suck. The game is a very good game.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to look at things that are weak points of the game and say, how do we bolster these up and make them stronger so that the game is better? So people have come to me and they've said, "You hate the game. You." Everything you say gives me no hope in the game. And I'm like, well, I actually really taken that to heart. I try not to be so critical that it's the only thing that happens. But on TeaTime, it just so happens it's basically what the show is, right? Is us being critical of different things that happen. And so if your only exposure to me is through TeaTime, then you'll find, I'm very critical. It's because that's kind of the point.
To be fair, I do feel maybe this is me just being positive again, but I've gotten a lot more positive response to criticisms and also speaking on behalf of ArenaNet and that sort of thing. I've gotten a lot more positive response than negative response. I just feel like the negative response usually tends to drown it out because it's a lot more harsh and it's a lot more, I guess, just gives you kind of that I don't know, whiplash feeling, if that makes any sense. Because like I've like read the comments before. A lot of the times, like they might not even mention like one person in particular, like one thing they said, whether it's for or against the game, but usually they're just piggybacking their ideas off of it, which I think is, that's kind of the purpose of these sort of discussions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I just shouldn't ever go on the internet ever again. But because it's I don't mind people saying things that are really negative. I don't even mind people like, flaming me or whatever. That's fine. But what does bother me is when I see basically in my comment section, I see how would I even describe it? I would say fake news or bad faith, right? That actually really bothers me. I admit it. I'll completely admit it. When people don't engage in good faith and kind of give ArenaNet a fair crack of the whip, right? And do that, it really bothers me actually. And when I see comments like that and responses like that get heavily, like really, really upvoted, either on the subreddit or in YouTube comment sections or even spammed in Twitch chat, it really bothers me because what people don't realize is that people are very trusting. Like as human beings, we're actually very trusting in my opinion. Like people will see a comment like that and assume that it is true. And that's what I don't like. Is that these totally decontextualized, horribly bad faith interpretations get then taken at face value and repeated elsewhere, which I think is an incredibly toxic cycle. That's not just Guild Wars 2, by the way. That's just the internet in general, which is why I was alluding to I should just not be here on the internet ever at this point. But I think a really good example of this is, and I actually genuinely do feel bad about this, right? Because to an extent anyway, there are some people who actually think Sneb is toxic. And it's not a joke, right? It's not a joke. For example, I have this comment here. How many channel points have I got to drop to remove toxic Sneb from TeaTime? It's like an actual comment.
Yeah, I don't know.
And that's like that's a very good example. But I mean, but why does that happen? Right? It's not just because, like we joke about it on stream. It's because Sneb will say a statement, something like, if you don't put in effort, you don't deserve to win. Right? And individuals and listeners will interpret that statement in the worst possible way, post a response to it, in a video that I've uploaded, and say something like, Sneb is ridiculously toxic, he wants to gatekeep people, he just wants to make it so that he wins and other people don't, which in a very twisted way is what's being said there. It's not in any way what Sneb is actually communicating, but technically speaking, yeah, you could twist that and somehow interpret that out, right? But the thing is, then people who haven't watched the video read that comment and go, holy shit, Sneb is toxic, right? And this is the type of kind of social media engagement that really upsets me. And I see it very prevalent because of the amount of frustration in the Guild Wars 2 community right now. Like all of this. I see it on YouTube, I see it on Reddit, right? I see it on Twitter, I see it everywhere, right? Twitch chat, whatever. That kind of stuff is what, I don't know why I'm really talking about this, but yeah, that really bothers me. It bothers me a lot. And I think it's very destructive.
It's a really interesting conversation, because I was on Xandri's podcast a while ago and I was talking about how I was taking a bit of a break from the game, or I wasn't playing as much, is what I meant. And largely the reason is actually nothing to do with the game and everything to do with the conversation around the game. I find that as people, we are what we eat, is the old saying, right? We are what we consume. If you are constantly taking in negativity, at some point you feel really negative. And I was just encountering so much negativity, and I was engaging way too much in it, that it was making me feel kind of down. So I just had to step away from that for a bit, because it's true. I think a lot of people are very harsh. And it's the internet, whatever, they can say whatever they want. I don't really care at the end of the day. But if you're reading that stuff all the time, it does eventually affect you a little bit. I don't think anyone is completely immune to that. If you're constantly reading Like if every day you logged onto the game and 10 people messaged you and said that you're worthless and that all of your effort is meaningless and those sorts of things, then you'd probably feel pretty bad after a while. Thankfully that doesn't happen to me. But at some point when people are saying, like, if people take that toxic meme and they really push it, at some point I sit back and I go, I have a guild and a community entirely based on helping players get into endgame content that otherwise couldn't, with a mentor system, a system where we match them into groups. And this person, in a roundabout way, is saying that none of that matters.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I sit back and I go, is that effort really not enough for them? Like, it's like really interesting as a content creator to think about that sometimes. And it's important to give yourself reality check that those things are just not true and that people are just trying to get under your skin. But every once in a while, I think for me, I'm naturally like a little bit, I naturally am a people pleaser and I like really care about helping people. And so when I see those things, I'm like does not compute, don't understand, what am I doing wrong, and probably too introspective.
Wait, so you're saying by calling you toxic, they're saying that like your guild is invalid and contributes and means nothing?
Well, because to me, how could I possibly be toxic to casual players if I'm literally helping the casual players
that's easy.
get into endgame
They're
content,
basing
right?
they're basing everything off a very bad faith interpretation of a statement, of like one statement.
Sure.
That's the problem.
But it's not fair from their perspective to say that it's like invalid or meaningless, because from their perspective, it's that you're basically telling people that in order to raid and in order to get into raids, you have to join my pipeline that I've created, and that's the only way. And
How have I
that's
ever
what the
said that?
people. Well, this is stuff that like people had expressed to me, because they would hear you on stream talk to people and say like, your gear is not good. Please don't ever join a raid again until you have the right gear. By the way, you can join my guild and we'll teach you to do things. And it's
That's a bit of a stretch because that's not what happened. But
let's that you know what though, I've got a really good example because let's synchronize.
Let's do it.
Let's synchronize.
Let's do it.
That did happen with Dragon's Den Sneb, if you recall. So when we were doing Dragon's Den, we would say, "Hey, just join our Discord, and we'll sort you out." Right? And the way that was interpreted was, you must join our Discord. This is the only way you can do this, essentially. Is that really what's going on there? Not really. I mean, that's a little bit of a stretch. That is the way that that sort of thing was interpreted. That's kind of what really Preston's getting at there, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the story you're referring to, Preston. Somebody came in.
No. I know. I'm not trying to like argue or contest. I'm just saying that it's even worse than what you thought it was, because they're not saying, "Oh, he's toxic, so the good things he's doing don't matter."
They're saying the good things are toxic. Yeah.
He's saying yes. He's saying you're toxic, and the things that you're doing that you're pretending are good are actually evil.
Yes.
So you can control the whole operation, and you can be like the big man in charge, and you can look like a good person.
This is like really meta content creator talk. So I don't even know.
Very meta. Yeah, it's like very meta right now. Holy shit. Yeah.
It's really interesting. Like people think that Teapot and I aren't friends, and that's
true. That's actually so.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is so crazy. It's actually insane. Yeah. Oh, this one blows
we're
my
not
mind.
Friends.
Yeah.
They also think that I completely leech and that I only talk to Teapot because my goal is to get viewers.
Yeah.
Let me spoiler alert. I stream in like 4 a.m. Teapot's time. The people that watch Teapot are asleep half the time. So that's really not the goal. I just think Teapot and I have good conversations and I enjoy talking to him because we're friends.
Yeah.
For the record, I think the conversations that you guys bring to the table are very good for the community as a whole, because it kind of like, I think both of you guys represent very different sides of the community, and you're like kind of talking about them and kind of acting as the spokesperson. I was gonna say though, I do think
Yeah,
a
go
lot
ahead.
of the stuff, like, where people are saying like, oh, like people are need to join Hardstuck, all of this like pipeline stuff. I think that goes back to what Teapot was saying. That's just a very bad faith take. And I think it's a bad faith take from a very small percentage of the community compared to like the vast majority of people that have benefited from it, right? Because it's like during the Dragon's End thing, like you had like 4 or 5 groups running at any one time, multiple times a day. That's already like 300, 400 people per day that are benefiting from, Hardstuck's like existence. And I think almost all of them would say, that was really cool. Like, I kind of want to do more of this stuff. This stuff is like really like, it kind of like motivates me to maybe find my own guild that might be doing similar things to this. And then there's just one bad apple that just so happens to get into one of the squads that says, oh no, like it's like that bird meme where there's like the crow in the background and there's like the fat bird that's like really nice and stuff. There's just one guy in the background that's just screaming like, oh no, these like guys are big ArenaNet shills. They just want to make money for their own communities, like that sort of thing. I don't think those people are honestly even worth thinking about, in all honesty, because in a way, like acknowledging them kind of like gives them credits, right? It's like just acknowledging their existence is in a way acknowledging their point, which I don't think is worth acknowledging at all. So
It's tough.
I don't know. I like people like that. I like the trolls.
You enjoy that?
I like the yes. I like the people who like genuinely participate in bad faith just for the sake of it. I like the people who grieve. I love that whole end of the spectrum, because if any of you have seen Rambo 2, where at the beginning of the movie he's in the like prison camp in the cage, and the guy comes up to him and is like, come on, why don't you come, we'll take you out of here, why don't you come with me? And he says, no, I like it in here because in here I know where I stand. Like, holy shit. Yeah. Anyways, Rambo. But it does, to acknowledge them, it does give them some amount of validation. And Sneb can speak to that, because acknowledging a particular individual named after a South Park character at Drakkar really made that individual try a whole lot harder with portals. That stuff's gonna exist, and whether or not it bothers you is kind of an up to you thing. I think it's fun. I think it's funny. It doesn't necessarily bother me. And we've had people in the chat the whole time like shit talking me, and like it's just like whatever. It gives a fuck. It's cool. Like, I like it. It means that it's a symptom of a couple of things. It's a symptom of the game not having content for a long time, and so people have to make up conspiracy theories or e-date or do other stuff to keep entertained. Like, that's where a lot of this comes from in Guild Wars 2. And the other stuff is just that people think they can only like one content creator, and if they spend any time with content creators community that's not like their main content creator, then it's just because let's find out, like, let's expose this person, they're evil, let's see like what they're up to. Like, it's got to be, there's no way, like, they can't be doing anything good. And like, that's the shit that goes on. But anyways, we all know Sneb's fucking evil and toxic.
True.
We all know that he and Teapot and I hate each other.
Yeah.
Well, either way, congratulations on your guild. I know you guys recently reached something like 20, 30 individual statics that are running. That's like
we're at
cool.
around 40.
Wow.
That's a lot of toxic players added to the game.
Yeah.
You should be ashamed of yourself, Snub.
I spend way too much time putting them all in groups and dealing with admin stuff, but it's fun. I actually really enjoy. I get comments every once in a while where people are like, "Man, I've been looking for something like this because I just was really struggling with pickup groups or whatever, and I feel like I've learned so much in a short period of time." Somebody actually made a comment on the Reddit, and I was like, "This is so nice." they made some comment about how they thought that the method in which we helped newer players get into raids was the best method, and I was like, "Wow, that's such a nice, kind, unprovoked thing to say." But yeah, I think it's been pretty cool. I had never advertised the guild really anywhere, like in the LFG or the subreddit or anything like that, because I was really scared. because people are very critical. And so I never did. And then one day I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna do it because I'm pretty proud of what we've got going on, and I think it could help people. And we exploded since then. So yeah, it's been a lot of work, but we have EOD
Marketing.
strike progression groups, we have Path of Fire groups, we have Heart of Thorns groups, and it's really cool. I think it's really special.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful to the leaders of those individual statics, the people that are putting in a little bit of extra effort and make it a good time.
Do you know what fascinates me about stuff like this? Is that something that isn't true can become true. Because
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
the thing that always gets repeated about me is that I say I'm going to quit the game constantly. This actually even got posted on the interview I had with Max as well. And this is the thing. It wasn't like a random con. It was a very deliberate con, and people upvoted it as well, right? But the thing is, it's almost like a paradox, right? You know, it's like a bootstrap paradox. It never happened, ever. It actually, someone said it, and then people upvoted it somewhere, and then other people saw it, and then they started posting it. It isn't real. It was never real, actually, ever. It literally never happened on my stream, right? And it's so, I find it fascinating. In some ways, it doesn't really bother me because that's a very harmless comment, right? It's like a really harmless thing to say. But it does bother me when fictional stuff pops up and propagates itself that's damaging to the game, right? And damaging to the community in that sense, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that really does bother me. You know, but it's so interesting that like this is the way it works. You know, I think it's often said that we live in a post-truth era, and I think it's completely true as well. Completely true. Things that aren't real can become real. It's like the fucking orcs in Warhammer, right? Okay, in Warhammer 40k, guys, the orcs believe that if you paint things red, it goes faster and you do more damage with your weapons. And basically in the context of the 40k universe, because of like this latent psychic power that the orcs have, it actually becomes real, right? You know, their vehicles do actually go faster because they paint them red, because they believe it, right? I feel like the humans on the internet are actually orcs, right? Like whatever we say actually becomes true. It's crazy. Yeah. That's
I like that. I saw a similar video where there was a female orc, and then what? Anyways,
was there something special about the?
Yeah. I wished for a change to happen, and then it came true about 45 seconds in.
Yeah,
but,
that's a good place. I think that's a good place to stop.
It is, yeah.
That'll do it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's as far as we're going. Does anyone have any final thoughts on the Guild Wars 2?
I don't think so.
I'm just kind of looking nervously at Emmy just being exposed to like the last 30 minutes of like genuine like deranged like unhinged rants, right? You're getting the full TeaTime experience now. Yeah.
No, that's why I haven't said anything, because I know if I open my mouth, I'm just gonna unleash on you guys. So that's why I haven't been saying anything.
Welcome to TeaTime. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap this up. So, thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. Give a big shout out to the hosts here, okay? Big shout out to the hosts. Get exclamation mark hosts in the chat. Let's go. You got to be clicking all the links. Click the links. It's below the stream. It's below the video. It's below the everything. But let's go. What have I got it in the title? Who's in order? No, you can't. We have to go in order. As the title says, it's Sneb, Emmy, and Brazil, aka Preston. So that is the order in which we go. Honestly, I don't even deserve a mention in that, and that's why I didn't put myself in the title. Sneb. How does it feel to
Well,
be Masters League NA 2v2 in
feels
StarCraft?
good, man. It
Yeah.
feels good. That was actually a really fun moment. I was really excited about that. Masters in 2v2. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I stream the game. I have a guild where we help people get into end game content on the North American server. We have like 40 statics. It's a good time. If you wanted to do strike missions, if you want to do Path of Fire raids or Heart of Thorns raids or a little bit of everything, there is a group for pretty much everything at this point. So hop on in. Happy to help you. That's kind of what we do.
Boom. There you go. Be sure to check all of that stuff out. And as a bonus meme, if you stay up really late, you'll get to hear me flaming Sneb's gameplay in StarCraft. And that's going to be great.
That's a huge upside.
Okay, so next up, okay, about to run away in terror from the horrors, okay, of kind of a slightly more old school tea time almost. It is Emmy. What are you up to these days?
Yep. So my name is Emmy. I do a lot of endgame PvE shenanigans on my stream. Usually stream about 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes a little bit more, mostly with an emphasis on helping newer players getting into endgame content. So things like strike missions, fractals, and raid trainings usually spread throughout the week. I also do a lot of like open world things to kind of just like hang out with the community. So HG trains, map completion trains, open world metas, that kind of stuff. And then also just talking about in general, like how to make money in the game. That's been a big topic on mine since everyone's like, now that the price of the antique summoning stones have been going down, how do you make money, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's usually what I'm up to. You guys saw my cat earlier. He already ran away somewhere, so I don't know where he went, but
There you go. And finally, it is the legendary, the gamer overlord himself. It is Preston.
Hi. What is up, everyone? I am Brazil, and today we had a classic old tea time. Ranted a lot, but if you want to follow me, Guild MM really wants everyone to follow me on Instagram because he likes my classic car pictures. So if you would like to do that, you can follow me at UWV_Preston. See some of the pictures that I've taken lately, and if you follow me, you'll get to see the pictures I take in the future too. What a great value. And also Twitch and Twitter is the same thing, UWV_Preston. And you can go to underworldvideo.com and you can buy pictures that I took. And they come on a piece of paper and you can put them on your wall. And it gives me your money. And I like money because I'm going to spend it on gyms. Actually, while we were closing out tea time, I went into the gym store and bought the chef's outfit with real money. So if someone could like buy one of my prints and give me the $10 back, that would be really great. But other than that, yeah, buy Surfshark VPN with Teapot's referral link. I actually Surfshark VPN with MightyTeapot's referral link, 82% off, ! VPN in the chat, actually saved me because I downloaded all of Initial D this past week so I could rewatch it instead of playing Guild Wars 2 for a little while. If I didn't have a VPN, the cops probably would have been at my door. And so, anyways, yeah. Buy Surfshark VPN.
Good call. And yeah, after all of that, you're on the stream right now. And whoa, actually, hang on. Could this be the day, chat? Could this be the day I get 60,000 followers? Yet another arbitrary milestone on the quest to get more and more internet points? I believe we could be in that situation. Right now, I'm doing the thing. I'm going on Social Blade. Whoa! Oh! Actually, hang on. Wait, 59,999. Are you kidding me? Wait, I actually just captured the 60,000 on stream. Wow, incredible. Now all of you fucks are gonna unfollow. Yeah,
unfollow you.
they've all started. They're all starting to unfollow. Yeah, they're all doing it now. Yeah, it's going down. Very funny, chat. Okay, wow. But anyway,
going back up. Going back.
You should definitely follow the stream.
It's way down.
There's a battle, right? It's tough, right? This is rough. But yeah, you should follow the stream. You should subscribe on YouTube. You should give me all of your money because this is something, me and Preston, we're aligned on this. We both love money. right? That's why, you know, I sell out for ArenaNet, guys. I get those ArenaNet partner, get those referral link clicks. It's big money, huge gaming, my friends. I'd love to see that. But yeah, you should go watch all the hosts here. There'll be links in the video. There's links underneath the stream. ! Hosts in the chat. You can't do that if you're on YouTube, but you can pretend that you did. And then you can look at the little chat UI there as well and pretend that you did it. You can kind of role play as a Twitch chatter. And you can come next time, you could do it as well. It's going to be a good time, but that's it. I am done. For today. I don't think I'll stream afterwards, actually. Maybe I'll stream for like 2 seconds afterwards, but not for very long because I'm tired and I just don't want to stream. Yeah, that's right. I'm quitting Guild Wars 2 and streaming. See, there you go. We've come full circle now. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, everyone. Okay, massive shout out to all of our wonderful guests, Sneb, Emmy, and Preston today. It was an excellent show, highly entertaining, I think. And of course, going over some very important topics as well. So thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful evening wherever you happen to be. And of course, make sure to check out all of the hosts and come back and watch every single day. Follow, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Take it easy, my friends. And we will see you all next time.